Now, there, I see you're having a feud with a guy called James Lindsay, and you you get a little smile on your face. You're enjoying that feud, I think. I like to have a feud or two here and there. I love it when you find someone who's your ideological opposite, or at least doesn't agree with you on something and acts atrociously. But thankfully, I don't have a clue who this James Lindsay character is. So fill us in on what's happening and what Lindsay represents.
Yeah, so James Lindsay is a very popular academic on the conservative right in the United States. Even though he's not a conservative, he's a liberal and an atheist. And he is the guy that's been propped up by basically all of conservative media and these conservative Inc., kind of like bought and paid for organizations to teach people about what the left is doing. And, there was a time when James Lindsay actually did a really good job. And I'll be the first to say he was very formative in my understanding of the left about 4 or 5 years ago. But since then, he's been kind of brought into this political machine where his job has become to sell a political narrative. Now, the thing of it is if you want to actually defeat the left, which I do want to defeat the left, I'm terrified of the left, you need to understand the enemy that you're fighting. And about probably 6 to 8 months ago, I realized that James Lindsay was lying to millions of people about what the left was actually doing in the United States. He was just selling them complete falsehoods in order to advance a conservative political narrative. And he was telling them things about, the way that James Lindsay conceives of queer Marxism, which is one of the areas that I focus on heavily, is he literally says, I'm not making this up, it is a Gnostic sex cult that is led by Oprah and the New World Order and the WEF and New Age spiritualists that is coming to steal your soul. And that sounds crazy, right? But I have people coming to me all the time saying, Carlin, this is a Gnostic cult. And I'm like, no, this is not a Gnostic cult. This is a group of people that want to abolish capitalism and destroy our entire way of life. Can we please hinge back into reality? And so over the course of several months, I've been trying to get James to listen to this. Members of my community have been trying to get James to listen to this. We've been trying to show him primary source video because that's all I work from, Johnny. I infiltrate leftist trainings and I record them and then I show the video on the internet, and we've been trying to show him this and he has just been completely unwilling to look at it. And so now we are ramping it up a notch and we are demanding a public debate between me and James Lindsay where I am going to be able to show primary source video of what the left is actually saying, and James can talk about whatever Gnostic sex cult he wants to talk about, and then the viewer can decide for themselves which they find more credible.
Oh, it'd be really interesting to get a panel together for that to be the moderators, because I know a few people who are experts in Gnostic cults, and they would be able to pick apart those bones. That's for sure. It's really interesting that people take that, or maybe it's infuriating. People take a stance and then they have a really hard time leaving that stance go because they've taken it. Or is it something more with James Lindsay? And that's really a follow-up question. Do you think this is James Lindsay just being obtuse, ignorant of other facts? Just he's made his decision, he's made his bed, he's lying in it? Or is this he's purposely trying to mislead people?
I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest. I think there's definitely stubbornness. I think there's definitely like he's making the bed and he feels like he's backed into a corner now and he can't back out. I also do think James has a vested monetary interest in selling these ideas because places like Moms for Liberty, a huge organization in the United States, pay him to tell people that the goal of the left is to sexualize children. Places like Turning Point USA to pay him money to do the same thing. And it's like, I'm not saying that sexualization of children doesn't happen. And I'm not saying it's not an unimportant thing to pay attention to. Of course, it's important. You want to protect kids from all of that. However, it is a teeny tiny sliver of what's going on the left. And far more important is this strategy to proactively abolish the gender binary, which the gender binary just means men and women. And what they're trying to do is utilize the public school system to convince kids that the gender binary does not exist, that everyone is some form of gender queer, gender fluid, a non-binary they, them. And that is a very purposeful attack, because if they can abolish the gender binary in the minds of young people, they're going to grow up believing that gender is not a real thing. That's going to have profound societal impacts, especially on the nuclear family, which is what the real target of queer Marxism is. It's to abolish the nuclear family because they believe that they cannot fully abolish a capitalist society and usher in Marxism until they abolish that. And so from my perspective, I'm like, we have to prioritize. And I understand that James likes this Gnostic cult narrative that he's being paid to sell people, but in reality, it's actually far worse. And there are millions of people right now that are being misinformed by him that are going to experience the impacts of that. Either if they have kids in public school, those kids are probably going to be fed gender ideology right under their nose. They're not going to understand it. Or the public schools are also a direct way that they're making attacks on parental rights to remove parental decision making over their kids. The people deserve to be properly informed of what is driving all this and what is causing it. And right now, James Lindsay is not doing that.
Well, hey guys, welcome to The Cult. The Cult is a show that I stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, where we talk about really whatever I feel like talking about on any given day. That was a clip from an interview I did this morning with Johnny Venmore, and actually, fun fact, I think I am Johnny's last guest on his last show that he was doing on that network. And that was just a coincidence, but that's actually kind of a cool thing. I love Johnny. I've interviewed with him a couple times now. He's just a really cool guy. And to be honest, I wasn't actually expecting him to ask about James. I thought we were going to talk about queer Marxism. He kind of slid that question in as a nice little surprise, I think, because I think he likes the drama of it all. But I was thrilled to be asked about it because, listen, I've only been demanding a debate with James Lindsay for a couple days now. And not only has James shut the hell up, and all of a sudden James is getting very, very quiet. Isn't that interesting? James Lindsay had so much to say about me on his Twitter page a couple days ago. He was saying all sorts of stuff. He said I had a personality disorder over and over and over again. He said I was a narcissist and borderline and that I just wanted to fuck him and this and that and the other. And he said I had violent sexual fantasies about him and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden when I was like, James, cut the bullshit and actually have an intellectual debate, all of a sudden, James, shut up. And James has been very quiet the past couple of days. And so we haven't really heard from him yet. Now, we've heard from James Lindsay's little minions, the ones that James likes to work with to harass me. We've heard from those people. Those people are saying, you're stalking James. You are a narcissist. And I'm like, I've laid out a very specific set of grievances. If you want to find the specific set of grievances that I have, you can head over to my Substack, which is Carlin, KARLYN.substack.com, and you can click on this article right here. I challenge James Lindsay to a public debate. It's right on the homepage, right at the top. And after you see all of the bullshit that James has been posting about me for months, the photoshopped images, the receipts that James is struggle sessioning places to cancel my work, the demands of James has made of his audience to block members of my community, and even the evidence that James might be stealing my work and claiming it's his, then you can get down to the very specific and clear grievances that I have with James's work. I lay them all out. The top 4, now I actually have way more than 4, but I did a top 4. Here are the top 4 things I would like to debate James Lindsay on. And then I gave some parameters for the debate, which is I will be able to use primary source video evidence. The debate will be live, so it will be unedited, and it will be conducted virtually. And those are my only parameters. James can create all the other rules. James can pick the moderators. I don't really care. Anyway, my specific grievances, my, I think, very reasonable demands for how the debate would work. And that's it. And now all of a sudden, James is very, very quiet. But you know what? We're going to keep the pressure on. We're not going to give up on this, James. This isn't going to be something we're going to forget about. Every time you say something dumb on your Twitter page, James, we are going to highlight it. Every single time you have a meltdown about the woke right, we're going to talk about it. Every single time you try to smear me and say I have a personality disorder because you can't handle an intellectual discussion in which you know you will be challenged for your ideas, we are going to talk about it. Every single time. Who did James flip off in that photo? Hey, Autumn, it's funny you asked. Maybe we need to bring Autumn up to speed here. Who did James flip off in that photo? Here you go.
What does I don't know. This might be coded, but I'm not sure. What does a Gnostic sex cult have to do with the far left's goal? This guy named Bot is going off about this Gnostic sex cult. What that?
And so we're just not going to answer that.
Okay, so that's I figured that. So we're just okay. That's why I figured that. Yeah.
It was Bot. It was Bot is the answer to the question. He was flipping off Bot because Bot sent in a super chat to Benjamin Boyce's show asking him about the Gnostic sex cult. And all of a sudden, James doesn't really want to talk about the Gnostic sex cult. But you know what's funny is people think I'm making it up, that James thinks that Oprah is part of a New World Order conspiracy theory to spread gender ideology to the masses through New Age spiritualist teachers. People think I'm making that up. That's one of the things I said in the interview with Johnny. Like, can we just peruse James Lindsay's Twitter feed for signs of mentions of Oprah? Because I really want people to know this is not something that I made up. James spent several months last year completely obsessed with Oprah. I don't know who needs to hear this, but Christ consciousness is not Christian. It is an occult. It is most prominently a part of what is called New Thought, which is a Gnostic Hermetic New Age cult of theosophy, which has been mainstreamed in American Western pop culture by Oprah et al. I've been saying this for years, that Oprah is one of the most damaging people in this country, thanks to her influence on moms in the 90s in particular. This is what I was talking about. We actually reviewed Lisa Logan's video where Lisa Logan was trying to prove that Oprah and New Age spirituality was responsible for gender ideology along with the WEF, and it was all part of a Gnostic sex cult conspiracy theory. That's actually what that video is about. You can go back and watch it. It's crazy, but this is stuff that James backed. This is a cult related to communism behind much of the radical culture shift that has allowed our current communist revolution to be as successful as it has been. The evolutionary leaders and their cult have been mainstreamed by people like Oprah Winfrey, big, and they're saying that Deepak Chopra and a bunch of New Age hippies from the 80s and like the 90s who were just selling New Age books, they're behind all this. Now, listen, I'm schooled in the art of woo. I understand who these people are. It's not it. It's just not it. You don't have to like New Age spirituality. You don't have to like crystals and tarot cards and chakras and all that stuff. But to say that New Age spirituality is responsible for queer Marxism and gender ideology is possibly the stupidest thing that I've ever heard in my life. And it is James's sincere belief that Oprah delivered all of this to the masses because she talked about their books on her show. I swear to God, this is what James actually believes. I'm not making this up. This is a whole video on a Google Drive that is just about like Oprah talking about A Course in Miracles. A Course in Miracles is a New Age spiritualist book. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to like it. But it has nothing to do with gender ideology or queer theory. If you think I sound crazy now, wait until I start telling you about the New Age thought and evolutionary leaders. Don't worry, Oprah Winfrey already introduced you to almost all of them on daytime TV. This was real. This is not something I made up. Oprah was a psyop. Like, James was tweeting about Oprah goddamn constantly. So when I said in that interview that James Lindsay believes that queer theory and queer Marxism is part of an Oprah-led New World Order, WEF, globalist New Age conspiracy theory, Gnostic sex cult, I'm actually not making that up. I may be saying it in a more hyperbolic way, but James has come about this close to actually saying that. And that should terrify everyone. That should terrify everyone. That should terrify... And yeah, can we laugh at James because this is stupid? Yeah, we can laugh at it because this is ridiculous. But it's also goddamn terrifying. Because when you actually look at queer Marxist literature, it is so clear where it comes from, and it is so clear what it says, and it doesn't say nothing about Oprah. They don't like Oprah. I promise you, actual queer activists do not like Oprah at all. So James is making stuff up, selling it to the masses. Oh, Reagan just put a meme in the chat. Let's see what Reagan put in the chat. Hang on. I will display it on the screen here. Just gotta get it loaded. An Oprah meme for memory. Let's see. Let's see what she has. Oh, wow. And you're a Gnostic, and you're a Gnostic, and you're a Gnostic, and you're a Gnostic. Yeah, James. Yeah, that's it, James. It's definitely not queer and narco-communists. It's not that. It's Oprah. Okay, bro. Sure. Yup. Anyway, so another interesting thing that we discovered last night, I haven't talked about this guy much. This guy's name is Michael O'Fallon. Michael O'Fallon runs an organization called Sovereign Nations. Michael O'Fallon is responsible for funding new discourses. This is my understanding. I could be wrong. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my kind of like understanding of the situation. Michael O'Fallon is responsible for funding James Lindsay and new discourses from the very beginning. And so whenever James Lindsay has an event, I've seen Michael O'Fallon at the singular James Lindsay event I went to. Michael O'Fallon was like running around like hosting the whole thing. I'm pretty sure on James's kind of initial teaching tour that he did, Sovereign Nations and Michael O'Fallon were actually paying for all of that. I'm pretty sure about that because Michael O'Fallon was hosting the event as though it was his event featuring James, not as though it was James's event. So Michael O'Fallon is the guy, basically the financier of James Lindsay. Now, why does that matter? Do you guys remember a couple of weeks ago when we watched James do a speech for Moms for Liberty, in which we found James overtly copying my work again? And in that speech, James said that he was going to Korea for something. And we're all like, why are you going to Korea, James? What's going on in Korea? Well, this might just be a coincidence. I just want to show you guys some stuff, though, that I think is kind of weird. And then maybe we can just... I don't want people to draw any conclusions from any of this. I just want all of us to put this information in our back pocket, okay? Why was James going to Korea? There's an organization called Asians for Liberty. One of the founders of that organization, Asians for Liberty, is Sue O'Fallon. Sue was born in Hong Kong and moved to the United States at a young age of 4 and proudly became an American citizen. That's awesome. Blah, 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 blah. She and her husband, Michael O'Fallon, reside in Florida and both love the Lord Jesus Christ and cherish their constitutional rights. So Michael O'Fallon, who funds James Lindsay, is married to Sue O'Fallon, who is the co-founder of this group, Asians for Liberty. Okay? But let's keep going. Do you guys remember this one? Do you guys remember this woman? She was the Jewish lady that was in the interview that James did with that rabbi. She was the one that challenged me to a debate. And then as soon as I accepted her challenge to a debate, she basically ran away and hid because she didn't actually really want to debate me. She just thought she wanted to debate me to posture on the internet. But then when she found out that I wasn't going to take any of her shit, she ran away screaming and crying. And apparently she tweets a lot. I was looking for the interview with her and James, but she was the woman that was in that interview with Rabbi Barclay. Did she really tweet this much? Like, geez. I can't find it on her timeline. But anyway, check this out. She works for the Epoch Times. She's the producer for American Thought Leader. And I want to say, I like Jan Jekielek a lot. I think he's really, really good. I have no beef with Jan at all, and I hope that we're cool because I've been on his show a couple times. I actually like him. This one, though, this one's interesting. So she works for the Epoch Times. The Epoch Times was born out of a need to provide uncensored news to the people immersed in propaganda and censorship in China, having witnessed events like Tiananmen Square massacre and the persecution of the spiritual group Falun Gong, and at great risk to themselves and their loved ones, a group of Chinese Americans began publishing the Epoch Times. Okay, we all know the origin of the Epoch Times is basically people who are rebelling against the CCP, which I actually don't have an issue with the Epoch Times in general. I actually think the Epoch Times does a fairly good job. Like, this is not an issue with the Epoch Times as a thing, but the Epoch Times is run by people in Falun Gong, which is a weird religious cult, some might say a Gnostic cult, that exists in China, and there's political persecution against them. I don't care what weird spiritual thing people practice, to be honest. I'm just saying. Epoch Times has covered Asians for Liberty. Isn't that interesting? Who else is in this article about Asians for Liberty? There's Sue O'Fallon, that's Michael O'Fallon's wife. And, oh, there she is, Z Van Fleet. Who is James's little lapdog that doesn't actually tweet anything unless James Lindsay approves of it? Z Van Fleet. And I feel bad saying that because I actually personally like Z Van Fleet. She has an amazing story. I actually don't like that she has put herself in this position because I think that she thinks she's doing the right thing. So I'm not shitting on Z Van Fleet. I think she thinks she's doing the right thing. I understand being in the position that she's in to be used as a political puppet, but she's James's. She's James's. And so, again, I don't know that there's any there to any of this, but it does kind of seem like a twisted web of things, doesn't it? So why the fuck was James going to Korea? That's what I want to know. That's kind of what I would want information on. That's what I would like to know next. Because the other thing is too, listen, I'm not like ambivalent to the horrors of the Chinese Cultural Revolution. I think that that's something that it's very important to study, that's very important to understand. And I do have a ton of respect for people like Z Van Fleet, regardless of if I disagree with her allowing herself to be used as a political tool. I mean, mad respect to her. She came through that situation. She got out of it. She's in America. She's telling her story. I really don't like throwing shade on the woman. Lily Tang Williams, same thing. I adore Lily Tang Williams. Don't have a bad thing to say about her. I really hope she wins her congressional election in New Hampshire. She is awesome. Went through the same thing. I'm not suggesting that Americans shouldn't learn about the Chinese Cultural Revolution because I think it's a very lesser understood topic. However, when we listen to the real far left, the real radical revolutionary socialists, they very, very, very rarely mention China. They almost never mention China. They almost never mention Mao. The people that they do mention are almost exclusively Marx and Lenin. Those are the big two. Marx and Lenin. They hate Stalin. They very rarely even mention Trotsky. And they very rarely mention Mao at all. So I'm kind of left wondering, is the left actually, and this is an open question, I don't have an answer to this, I'm putting the question out there into the universe for people to consider. is the left actually significantly influenced by Mao and the Cultural Revolution as much as James Lindsay would like to have us believe, for reasons that I think we might start to be able to suss out why he's pushing the narrative that this is all about, what does he call it, Maoism with American characteristics, because he is funded by a guy who is married to an immigrant from Hong Kong who started the group Asians for Liberty, and so he has a vested interest in pushing this idea that this is Maoism with American characteristics because he's working with people who hate the CCP, who want everyone to see the CCP as the ultimate enemy. And I'm not saying that the CCP is good. I'm not suggesting that. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that the real radical revolutionary left very, very, very rarely talks about Mao. So why does James Lindsay, whose one and only job is to teach people about the left, why does he almost exclusively talk about Mao? Why does he say that what's happening in America is Maoism with American characteristics when the actual people, the actual activists, the real ones that are pushing the real ideology in the real world, do not reference Mao? They reference Marx and they reference Lenin. They talk about how the Russian Revolution is the greatest event in the history of humanity. They talk about how they want to redo the Russian Revolution in the United States. They don't say anything about Mao and the Cultural Revolution in China. Why is that? Again, I don't know the actual answer, but that to me seems very, very, very suspicious. That it seems as though James is being funded by people who have a vested interest in Americans believing that China and the CCP is their worst enemy. I'm not suggesting the CCP is good. I'm not suggesting the CCP is on our side. I'm not suggesting any of that. I'm not saying that the Cultural Revolution was good. I'm not saying any of that. What I do know is that the CCP hates queer ideology. They don't have that shit there. And Dragon Balls lives in Hong Kong, so he would know. So why? Why are we being propagandized to by James Lindsay to make us believe that what we're experiencing in the United States is currently akin to the Cultural Revolution in China? Because if that were true, we wouldn't be seeing all the queer bullshit that we're seeing. Again, I don't know the answer to this. I'm just putting out the question. Because the left tells us what they're doing. The left tells us who they're inspired by. The left tells us who they're trying to emulate. The left spends an exorbitant amount of time studying history and philosophy and all their favorite Marxist teachers. They have classes about this. They have study groups about this. I mean, it is true. The USSR was socially conservative too, so maybe that has nothing to do with it. It entirely could be that has nothing to do with it. But what I do know for absolute sure is that the left talks about Marx and Lenin significantly more than they talk about Mao. And it's not even close. It's not even in the same ballpark. So I just want everyone to think about that. And I just want everyone to put that in the back of their head and just keep it there. And we're going to ponder that. And while we're pondering that, we're just going to see if maybe any other useful information comes up in the cultural zeitgeist that might help us to understand this phenomenon. So I'm going to... Well, I mean, this is actually a really fair point. Actually, human centipede, you're right. We were just talking about this yesterday, weren't we? Lenin legalized homosexuality first thing. That's right. I had forgotten about that. Huh. Interesting. Lenin also legalized abortion immediately. That's true. We did learn that yesterday, didn't we? Interesting. Interesting. So just put that in the back of your head. In the meantime, I have more woke right news, because guess what we're watching today, guys? We are watching Benjamin Boyce. I have nothing bad to say about Benjamin Boyce. I have never shit-talked Benjamin Boyce. I think Benjamin Boyce does a great job. I have nothing bad to say about the guy, and I found it a little bit amusing the other day when Benjamin Boyce was trying to challenge James on this woke right bullshit, and Benjamin posted a whole Twitter thread saying the definition of woke centrism, just to try to illustrate how ridiculous James was being about the whole thing. And James tried to struggle session him publicly, and Benjamin didn't take the bait. And then good on Benjamin for getting Konstantin Kisin on his show, because Konstantin Kisin is one of the people who's pushing this quote-unquote woke right narrative. And you can tell, I think, even the look on Benjamin's face in that freeze frame. Can we all just tell that Benjamin is a little unimpressed with this woke right narrative? I want to watch this interview. I have to watch it. I had no idea he was doing this. I saw this premiering earlier and I was like, all right, sold. We need to watch this interview for the show today. I need to see what happened, because I am just genuinely, I'm genuinely fascinated by where all this woke right bullshit is coming from. And I really do believe that someone's being paid to do this. There's just that little voice in the back of my head. You guys know that I'm very rarely wrong about stuff like this. Like, maybe once in a blue moon I'm wrong, but very, 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 I have an exceptional track record. And when the little voice comes into the back of my head and they're like, all of these things seem to be coordinated and all of these things seem to be happening at the same time. And look, it's all the usual people who are pushing all this bullshit. I want to know who's pushing this. I want to know where it started. I want to know what the point is. I want to know what the goal is. I want to know who's funding it. And so I'm fascinated. I want to know what Konstantin Kisin says, so we're going to watch this interview. But before we get into that, guys, just a couple quick orders of housekeeping. If you appreciate the work I do, I hope you'll consider heading over to my Substack, which is Carlyn, Karlyn, .substack.com. If you appreciated that clip of the interview that I played with Johnny earlier, that is up on my Substack. It is also up on my YouTube and Rumble channel. You can also read the full challenge to James Lindsay. You can catch the on-demand replay of the live socialist call that we infiltrated last night. I will be having clips of that coming up. Hopefully later today, maybe tomorrow, honestly, because I'm really tired. I didn't really get a lot of sleep last night, so I apologize for that. It's just the way it goes. But I will have clips from that coming soon. But if you want to see the full live socialist call that we infiltrated last night for Spy Stream, that is available on the Substack. Also, you can head over and find the new Socialist Dictionary. I have the first draft of the Socialist Dictionary published on my book Substack. This is where I'm writing, basically what's turned into a series of books that you guys are going to get to follow along as I draft the books and write the books. You're going to get to see the information as it's actually produced. You don't have to wait for it to be published. And right now, I have the first draft of the full comprehensive socialist dictionary that has ever been created. This is so much better than anything that James has on his website. And guess what? Speak Socialist is a completely paid site. You have to have a membership to be able to access the content, but you can get a 7-day free trial. You can check out the Socialist Dictionary, and if you appreciate it, you can continue to get updates as I work out the content for these books. Also, paying members of speaksocialist.substack.com will receive a complimentary digital copy of the Socialist Dictionary, because the point of this is I will be putting it into a book form at some point. You'll be able to buy it as a paperback. You'll be able to download an ebook. But if you're a paying member of Speak Socialist, because you're funding this entire project, you will get a free digital download of the Socialist Dictionary in its final form before anyone else has a chance to see it. And that is my thank you for supporting the work I'm doing. And I really, really do appreciate it. And with that out of the way, let's just dig in, guys. Please mount the like button for me if you would be so kind. Mounting the like button lets YouTube know to recommend my content to more people, and I really would appreciate it. Please make sure you are subscribed on whatever platform you're watching on. And if you feel so inclined to send in a super chat to help fund the work I'm doing, I do have a $100 super chat goal per stream just to help fund these streams, to make it possible for me to do this stuff with you guys every single day. So if you appreciate it, send in a $5 super chat, $10 super chat. It doesn't need to break the bank or anything. 20 people send in a $5 super chat, then I met my super chat goal, and we can all be happy. We can all be happy with that. But let's get this party started, and let's see what happened with Benjamin Boyce and Konstantin Kisin.
Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Konstantin Kisin, who is the co-host of Trigonometry. It's a podcast and a YouTube channel, or just a show, they call it.
Oh,
and
by the way, I wanted to say this too. Sorry, one more thing. A guy named Justin sent me this beautiful mug, and that's my name in Elvish. He translated my name into Elvish, and he put it in a mug, and I'm drinking some glorious tea out of it right now. And I just wanted to say, shout out Justin. Thank you for the wonderful gift. I really do appreciate it. I just wanted to show it off. I posted a picture of it on Twitter. But thank you for the present. I do appreciate it. You know, you guys don't have to send me presents, but when you do, I really appreciate it. All right, let's go back. Starting again.
Conversation, we tackle his contention that there is this phenomena, this social phenomena called the woke right. Now, we get into the content of how we got to discussing that. Within the conversation, we speak a lot about his contentions with the amateur historian and podcaster Daryl Cooper, aka Martyr Maid, who was on Tucker Carlson's show a couple of weeks ago and said some salacious things about Churchill and Hitler and fascism and stuff like that. I attempt to clarify Konstantin's position, and I don't know if I came in there with a desire to debate or anything, but I feel like I got more understanding about what his concerns are with regard to right-wing discourse or left-wing discourse or whatever it is that is called woke.
His concerns are that Konstantin Kisin wants to be able to control everything that everyone else says and everyone else does and people that other people talk to. This is not the first time that Konstantin Kisin has tried to control people. Do you guys remember when Pearl was on Trigonometry? And Konstantin Kisin decided to grill her about Pearl daring to interview Nick Fuentes. Be like, why didn't you push back on him harder? How dare you not ask him these questions? Why didn't you conduct the interview in the way that I would have? And Pearl was like, it was my interview, bro. I'm sorry, Konstantin. I didn't know I reported to you. So this is not the first time Konstantin Kisin has tried to censor people from talking to people that Konstantin doesn't like, from considering ideas that Konstantin doesn't like. And listen, man, I don't know that I agree with everything Daryl Cooper said, but Daryl Cooper didn't really seem like a right-wing extremist to me. Daryl Cooper seemed like a guy that was looking at both sides of history, that was looking at multiple different perspectives, that was doing it in a pretty pragmatic and nuanced way. And you can disagree with the conclusions that he's made and not call him a fascist. I'm just saying, it is actually possible. It is possible to disagree with someone's conclusions and at the same time not call that person a fascist. Yeah, I'm kind of curious. Who exactly made Konstantin Kisin the arbiter of truth? And who cares what Daryl Cooper says on his podcast? Like, if you like it, great. If you don't like it, fine. Daryl Cooper is one person who has one perspective on history amidst how many people who have a different perspective on history? Why isn't he allowed his perspective?
Find him to be a very valuable voice in this time of turbulence. You can find him via the links below. Go ahead and look up Trigonometry if you haven't already. And if you enjoy this content, do support it however you feel so moved. Without further ado, here is Konstantin Kisin. You've been working with this term woke right for longer than just the last couple of weeks. You did a video at Tucker Carlson about 6 months ago after you went to Russia, maybe longer than that. And you're trying to define or discuss a phenomena that you see coming from, I guess, the right, whatever that means. One way of defining the right is the not left, or whoever's kind of agitating against the power structure, whatever that is, or there's positive principles on the right. So could you define right and left, and then we can get into what the woke right phenomena is?
Well, maybe what we should get into first is how this conversation came about. Yeah, I think that's probably the most helpful place to start. If you don't mind me sort of taking the initiative a little bit on that.
No, that's what you do.
So the reason we're having this conversation is I wrote a Substack article, which I recorded as a video, in response to the fact that Tucker Carlson hosted, if we are being generous, we would say an amateur historian on his show called Daryl.
Well, is he really an amateur historian, though? Does Daryl Cooper get paid to be a historian? Does Daryl Cooper make money off his podcast? Does Daryl Cooper spend, does he have is this something that he, because, the definition between amateur and professional is you don't get paid if you're an amateur. You do get paid if you're a professional. Am I wrong about that? Is there another qualification for professional? That's the distinction between amateur athlete and professional athlete, right? So I don't know that you can actually call Daryl Cooper an amateur historian if he's making money off of his podcast. Because someone's paying him. Someone thinks he's a professional.
Cooper, in which they discussed World War II and Churchill, in which this guy made a number of, let's say, inaccurate statements about World War II and Churchill. He called him a psychopath. He said he was the chief villain of World War II.
Because he is.
He accused him of committing atrocities and bombing the Black Forest simply because Churchill was vindictive and petty.
True.
He liked to play with toy soldiers while he was prime minister and would freak out if someone interrupted him. And Churchill was an all-round baddie who rejected,
if anyone doubts that what Konstantin Kisin is saying right now is actually true. Konstantin Kisin doesn't believe it's true, but you can check out my interview with Keith Knight that I did on Monday. Keith Knight brought us a plethora of primary source evidence from Churchill himself. Reading in Churchill's own words, he gave us documents that you can look up where he's collected all of this primary source evidence in one place. And so I just want to say, basically, if this is what Konstantin Kisin has an issue with, then Daryl Cooper told the truth. It was confirmed to us by Keith Knight on Monday. Konstantin Kisin might not like it, but facts don't care about your feelings, Konstantin.
Wonderful Hitler's peace over.
Oh shit! Hang on.
Overtures. Wonderful is satirical in this case. He didn't actually say that, but I'm sort of paraphrasing. And when Tucker Carlson asked him why he thought this had happened, why Churchill was the instigator of World War II who wanted another world war, he said it's because he'd performed badly in the First World War, which, by the way, is not inaccurate. And then gave this kind of weird wry smile, which Tucker picked up on and said, that's the wryest smile I've ever seen, which was followed by this guy saying, well, yes, Zionism, Churchill had some powerful financiers.
Yeah.
And that's basically why he had this hatred for the Nazis in Germany. Right?
Yeah.
Because he was funded by the Zionist bankers. No one likes to hear that their war heroes played with dolls. I mean, I suppose that's true, but Konstantin Kisin has positioned himself in the public as the savior of liberal values. So Konstantin Kisin is not supposed to factor his own personal fifis into the equation when we're making historical judgments. He's supposed to actually look at the evidence like a big boy, and not just the evidence that supports the conclusion that Konstantin Kisin wants, because that's not actually a liberal value. Cherry-picking evidence and engaging in confirmation bias is not a liberal value. What he's supposed to do is look at the breadth of evidence on both sides and then make a more nuanced argument that encapsulates all of it. That's what he's supposed to do. Thanks for the super chat, okay? Appreciate it.
This provoked, quite, as you imagine, a significant reaction, particularly among historians, and we have a lot of historians on trigonometry. Yeah. I'm someone who's curious about history, so is Francis.
Konstantin just had on a historian that overtly called Daryl Cooper a fascist the other day.
And to me, that seemed to be... So just to clarify, I've got no issue with this guy, Daryl Cooper, whatever. People are allowed to have any opinion they want. They're allowed to express it in public.
In fact, shouldn't we all be canceling Konstantin Kisin for platforming a historian that called someone he intellectually disagrees with a fascist? Shouldn't we all be doing that? And listen, normally I wouldn't say that, but I just want to follow Konstantin Kisin's rule book here. Because Konstantin Kisin is overtly trying to struggle session people just because he intellectually disagrees with them. He's calling for their cancellation. He's trying to smear them. He's calling them all fascists. So if Konstantin Kisin can play that game, then why can't we play that game too? Because, I don't know, maybe I was just naive back in 2020 when social justice took over my knitting community and screwed everything up, and I left the Democratic Party because of it, because I was like, I'm not going to be around these people who are trying to censor speech and censor ideas and censor all this stuff. Because they were calling, I am old enough to remember when it was the social justice left who was calling everyone they disagreed with a fascist because they intellectually disagreed with them. And I left the left because of that nonsense, and it wasn't to join a right wing or a so-called anti-woke liberal values, classical liberalism, WTF, whatever. It wasn't to join these people in doing exactly the same thing. So if Konstantin Kisin can call someone a fascist because he intellectually disagrees with him, and if Konstantin Kisin can have historians on his show who call people they intellectually disagree with a fascist instead of actually arguing their intellectual points, then why can't we call Konstantin Kisin and any historians he has on his shows fascists, because they're doing exactly the same thing as the social justice left?
To host podcasts, they're allowed to have their own audience. No one is saying anything about that. Yeah. What's interesting to me is the Tucker Carlson show, I don't know if it's the biggest or certainly one of the biggest in the United States, would choose to host somebody like this. And the reason I say that's interesting to me is, there's this myth that, Tucker Carlson just talks to, people with different perspectives. It's actually not true. In the first article I wrote 6 months ago after he went to Russia, I talked about my own experience.
Is Konstantin Kisin pissed off because Tucker Carlson hasn't had him on his show? Because I know for a fact that James Lindsay is pissed off that Tucker Carlson hasn't had him on his show. I know that because James tweeted about it. Isn't that interesting?
Has someone who'd been on Tucker's show repeatedly. And when the moment I suggested to his producer that we discuss the issue of Ukraine, on which I have a different perspective to Tucker, unlike the issues he invited me to talk on repeatedly, which are things that we agreed on.
Yeah.
On the Ukraine issue, it was met with a kind of stiff arm, let's not talk about this. And if you continue to push, we're basically going to ban you from ever appearing on the show.
Hey, funny. Hey, Konstantin, that's really funny. Konstantin, it's really funny you say it like that, because Konstantin, I remember sliding into your inbox after you said about me on a public live stream that all I ever did was fight with people, and I slid into your DMs and I said, Konstantin, maybe you haven't seen all the independent journalism that I've been doing over the last year, because you seem to be under this impression that literally all I do is fight with people, and maybe if you're really interested in defeating the left in the United States, Konstantin, here are all these stories that I've broken, undercover jobs that I've done, things that I've exposed about the left no one's talked about, and maybe you might be interested in this. And then in thanks for me doing that, Konstantin Kisin unfollowed me on Twitter and then blocked me. So it's kind of interesting that you got your panties all in a twist, Konstantin, about Tucker Carlson not wanting to talk to you about a topic that he disagreed with on, when you overtly did the same thing to me. And the irony of it is, Konstantin, you don't actually even disagree with me on these criticisms of the left. You just don't like how I articulate the points, and you don't like that, I have a lot of primary source evidence or whatever. I don't even know exactly what it is you don't like. Here's what it is. Konstantin Kisin doesn't like that I question people that Konstantin Kisin is friends with, and James Lindsay is one of those people. So Konstantin Kisin doesn't want to talk about the very real primary source evidence that I have that contradict James Lindsay's narrative about what the left is doing, but he wants to get his panties all in a twist because Tucker Carlson doesn't want to have him on his show? Isn't that interesting? Said it before and I'll say it again. The Israel thing is tearing the mainstream conservative movement from the inside, and it's hilarious to see. Yup. No, I'm definitely not in their clubhouse. And you know what? That's okay. I have made peace with that. You know what? I made my own fucking clubhouse.
That was the pushback that I effectively got. And so it's not true that he has people on from different perspectives. What's more, when he had this guy on, he introduced him as the most honest, best and most important historian in America today.
He's allowed to have
so
an opinion.
It's not like he's just having this person on to hear a perspective with which he's unfamiliar.
Yeah.
And to analyze it critically. That's the other thing that didn't happen in Tucker's interview with this guy. He didn't challenge him on a single thing that this guy said.
This is exactly the same thing that Konstantin Kisin did to Pearl. He brought Pearl, just Pearly things, onto trigonometry and was like, why did you interview Nick Fuentes? Why didn't you challenge Nick Fuentes? Why didn't you push back on Nick Fuentes? Why were you so nice to Nick Fuentes? You can go back and watch it. It was disgusting. Konstantin Kisin seems to believe that he is the boss of everyone on the goddamn internet, and that everyone who has a show on the internet that interviews people has to report to Konstantin Kisin regarding how they handle the interview on their show.
So it's not true that he's hosting these perspectives from different sides and then going, well, that doesn't make sense. Let me ask you this and let me check that and let me clarify that and let's maybe... He doesn't do any of that. He brought a person on whose perspective he never challenged. He endorsed this person's perspective. And to my knowledge, he's never hosted anyone to talk about the history of World War II. Even though he has had many people on who could talk about it authoritatively in the past. One of them is Sir Neil Ferguson, with whom we're about to release an interview as we're recording this, talking about this. He's written books, including challenging some of the mythology of World War II, by the way.
Yes.
He's had Victor Davis Hanson on his channel many, many times in the past. Again, this is somebody who could give him a perspective on World War II that's actually factually based and historically literate. He hasn't done any of that.
Yeah,
so what I see, and which is, by the way, the label that, you know, and then you criticized me on Twitter for calling it the woke right. That's how we're here.
Yeah,
Sorry that it's taken so long. I apologize that the setup is long. But that's how we're here. And you were very gracious and, you know, when I said, well, it seems like a bad faith take, you kind of apologized and you were like, well, I sort of got offended by this and blah, blah, blah. And that's all cool. It's part of discourse. Great. So why the woke right? I am not attached to the label woke right, although I have some reasons why I think it's important and we can...
See, now what's happening is that Konstantin Kisin and James Lindsay are getting a metric ton of shit for trying to push this woke right label. And both of them have now come out and said, listen, we can call it something else. Do you guys have any better suggestions? We don't have to call it the woke right because everyone's dragging them. Yep. Konstantin beautifully embodies the iron law of woke projection, uses woke tactics to cancel those you disagree with while continuing to say that they are the true woke right. Yeah, exactly. Konstantin is the woke right because he's being an authoritarian and telling everyone else not to engage with ideas.
We will talk about that, I hope. Sorab Armani calls it the barbarian right, and he has good reasons for calling it that too.
Right.
Other people call...
If you disagree with Konstantin Kisin, you are literally a barbarian.
Call it the illiberal right, and I think they have good reasons to call it that. Some people call it the transgressive right, and they have good reasons to call it that. Some people call it the dissident right. We can talk about it whichever way we want. The reason I call it the woke right is I am looking at it. Look, all language is modeling, right? I'm never going...
Yeah, this is a great point. Konstantin Kisin saying that taking an anti-war position is the barbarian right. And that was the same position that that Jewish woman took in that interview with James Lindsay and Rabbi Barclay. She literally said it. She said, you're on the woke right if you are anti-interventionist and anti-war. You can go back and listen. That is a almost literal verbatim quote. You are on the woke right if you are anti-interventionist and anti-war. Because we must do everything we can to defend Israel. And we must go to war with Iran on behalf of Israel because that's what we're obligated to do with Americans because Israel is our greatest ally after all.
Going to find the words to describe perfectly the reality that exists. Neither is Sorab, neither you, nobody, neither is anyone else. What I'm seeing is many of the same tactics, many of the same approaches, and many of the same objectives. that we have seen on the woke left for the last 10 years being replicated on the right. And in this particular instance, the obvious thing, and I mean, it's so striking. I regard you as someone who's principled and smart. So forgive me for saying that I don't understand why you don't see this, and perhaps we'll unpack that together. Why?
Because Benjamin Boyce is an intellectually honest player, Konstantin, and you are not.
We see it differently, but we have had a decade now where we have had people like Winston Churchill be attacked by the woke left. And his legacy and his history.
It is mind-boggling to me. I'm sorry, I know I'm pausing a lot, but like, I have a lot to say, and it's my show. I'll do what I want. It is mind-boggling to me that the hill that Konstantin Kisin is dying on is you cannot question anything that Winston Churchill said or did. Winston Churchill is not a god. Winston Churchill was a politician. Winston Churchill was a politician during wartime who provably, just objectively, made decisions that resulted in the deaths unnecessarily of hundreds of thousands of civilians. This is just fact. This is not in dispute. Winston Churchill had the chance to stop the war anytime he wanted. And not only did Winston Churchill not do that, Winston Churchill dragged the United States into war. The United States was not going to enter World War II until Winston Churchill just started dragging us in that direction. How many people died? How many innocent civilians were killed? Some killed in absolutely horrific circumstances because of Winston Churchill. And you're going to tell me that we have to put Winston Churchill on a fucking pedestal like a god and never question any of the decisions he made ever? Bullshit, Konstantin. There is not a single politician in the history of humanity that should be placed above reproach, because at the end of the day, they are always politicians. And politicians, universally, are the enemy of the fucking people. Dragon Balls, thank you for the super chat. This is also a Brit ego trip. Watch the first 10 minutes of his conversation with Neil Ferguson, insulting Americans for a hot second before calling Tucker a Putin platformer and Cooper a mere podcaster. This is a woke chamber. I'm not surprised by that at all. As soon as I saw the thumbnail and they were like, Daryl Cooper is literally a fascist, I was like, bro, like, eat every dick, Konstantin. Literally and sincerely, eat every dick.
And his actions be revised for the purpose of undermining what Tucker in that interview talks about, which is the mythology of our societies and our civilization. And the woke left have done this quite purposefully because they know that if you pull out the key pins that hold this structure together, you can undermine the entirety of how we see the Western project, its history, and our civilization, right?
Yeah.
So that's one aspect of it. The attempt to undermine the history of our civilization in a way that creates a different perspective on it. And Tucker, by the way, is quite open that he's doing that in this interview. He talks about the fact that, you know, every war is now painted as, you know, appeasement versus Churchillian strength and whatever, and that's how we're sold all these lies about these forever wars, and we've got to break that pattern. Essentially, that's what he's saying, right? But I also felt that with what we saw in Russia, what he did in Russia, including those bizarre videos he did from McDonald's and the train station and the shopping cart stuff. You know, in that first article, I talked about the fact that to me this looks very much like George Bernard Shaw, who was a principled, critical voice of the left, who absolutely adored Stalin. and the Soviet Union because he saw it as an alternative to the decadent, self-destructive, opulent, lost
Inefficient.
society and inefficient in which he was living.
Yeah.
Yes, right. So at no point have I said that Tucker is an idiot or that he is a bad person.
But
or
you see a
whatever.
pattern, and you're questioning
Yes.
that pattern. And the pattern you see is that he's trying to destabilize one narrative. Do you see him trying to prop up another narrative? I mean, is there like a switcheroo happening, or is it?
I don't know.
Purely
I
critical?
think it. Well, if you think about what wokeness was about, it was never about saying these things are untrue and here is a bunch of things that are true. It started first and foremost with the assertion that truth doesn't exist. Right?
No.
Yeah.
More or less. Right?
No.
Yeah.
No. Wrong. Wrong. Completely and totally wrong. Konstantin Kisin is confused. Konstantin Kisin believes the definition of wokeness is postmodernism. Postmodernism was an outcome of wokeness. It wasn't the result of it. Or excuse me, it wasn't the cause of it. It was the result.
You've been told a bunch of lies about history. You've been told a bunch of lies about your society. The entirety of your civilization is propped up by these myths and whiteness and patriarchy and all of this stuff.
That's not what any of that means, Konstantin. How is it fucking possible that these people are the so-called experts in the left and they talk about the left all the time and they do all these shows on the left and they do all these interviews on the left and they have no fucking clue what the left actually means when they say any of those words? Pop quiz for my chat. Is Konstantin telling the truth? That the left just has all these crazy ideas about race and gender and what they believe is that reality is not real. Is that what the left believes? Let's listen to that again while you guys are pondering your answer for the chat. Let's just listen to that little portion again.
Told a bunch of lies about history. You've been told a bunch of lies about your society. The entirety of your civilization is propped up by these myths and whiteness and patriarchy and all of this stuff is kind of like these broad sweeping categories. And we are just asking questions about
Wrong. Whiteness and patriarchy are just these broad sweeping categories. You're going to come to that conclusion if you listen to assholes that are lying to you like James Lindsay. That is not what the left believes, Konstantin. That's not what they believe. You're lying, Konstantin. You're either lying because you listen to horrible people or you're lying because you willfully want to deceive your audience. And we know you believe this because you fucking listen to James. No. What he just said isn't even postmodernism, by the way. Whiteness and patriarchy are references to the same thing. Pop quiz for the chat. What are whiteness and patriarchy references to? When the left says whiteness and when the left says patriarchy, what are they talking about? It's not some fucking nebulous category. Like no one really knows what the definition of these terms are. It is not a fucking nebulous category. What is the left talking about when they say both whiteness and patriarchy? Because it is the exact same fucking thing. It's just attacking it from two different angles. They're talking about capitalism, you retard. Capitalism. Capitalism, 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 capitalism. The left believes that capitalism created whiteness when it created slavery in the United States. Slavery created systemic disparities in outcomes. Those systemic disparities are called systemic racism. The only way to defeat racism is to overthrow and abolish capitalism. The left believes that capitalism created the patriarchy in the United States. Another term for the patriarchy is the gender binary. That means men and women. Capitalism put men in the workplace, women in the home, doing the unpaid labor of raising the next generation of proletarian workers that is the nuclear family. Both of those words are references to capitalism. Whiteness is a reference to how capitalism, which is defined as private property ownership, created whiteness or racism. Racism and whiteness in this case is not a reference to skin color. It's a reference to systemic racism, the system that upholds racism. The system is capitalism. The left overtly says the only way to defeat racism is to abolish capitalism. The left believes that capitalism created the patriarchy, created the gender binary that put men in the powerful positions with all the money in the workplace, women in the oppressed positions in the home, relegated to raising the children who would become the next generation of proletarian workers under capitalism, which also reproduces capitalism as a social system in our society. It is both attacking capitalism from two different angles. Why doesn't Konstantin Kisin know this? Why don't any of these people who do commentary on the left all the goddamn time, why don't they ever actually listen to the left? Why don't they look at clips that I've been making for fucking years that were sitting literally in Konstantin Kisin's inbox? And when I sent him those clips, he unfollowed me on Twitter and blocked me because he doesn't want to know. This is not up for dispute. Every single thing that I said did not come from me. Every single thing that I just said comes from the far left. And that is where wokeism comes from, Konstantin. It's Marxism. That's what it is. That's what postmodernism is. That's what social justice is. That's what critical race theory is. That's what gender ideology is. That's what queer theory is. That's what environmental justice is. That's what reproductive justice is. That's what disability studies is. That's what fat studies is. Every single fucking thing. That's what universal healthcare is. That's what public education is because they own the public education system. They want to get rid of all homeschooling and private schooling. That's what all of this stuff is. And it is so clear, and it's not hard, and it's not confusing, and all you have to do is listen to the left for like a goddamn week, and you understand all of this. But the influencers that are propped up by the conservative right to shill a political narrative lie to their audiences. And they lie over and over and over again until their audiences are completely confused about what's going on. There's just these words have no definition. They're just making it up. Let's listen to him say that again. Given that I've just literally defined all of it clearly and succinctly based on primary source evidence, you lying goddamn shill.
You've been told a bunch of lies about history. You've been told a bunch of lies about your society. The entirety of your civilization is propped up by these myths, and whiteness and patriarchy and all of this stuff is kind of like these broad sweeping categories. And
those broad sweeping categories, who knows what those words even mean? Who knows, guys? They're just made up terms. They could mean anything. They could mean anything. They're just made up. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay. They can't be grifters anymore if they show the primary source video evidence to their audiences. Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly the problem, isn't it? Who do we have on our side? No one. You have me, that's it. No, that's not entirely true. I'm being a little facetious there. Listen, I actually do think Nick Fuentes is on our side. Konstantin Kisin's going to call me a right-wing fascist for saying that. You might not agree with everything Nick Fuentes says, but Nick Fuentes is at least grounded into reality and he cares about the truth. Now, he has his own interpretations of things, but he is an excellent analyst, and I think he's a lot more honest because he's not paid for by anyone but his audience. He's completely funded by his audience. I think Andy Ngo does a phenomenal job. I really do. I do think Andy Ngo is on our side. There are a couple journalists that do on the ground reporting. I think Aaron, oh God, I'm going to butcher his last name and I apologize. It's like Siberian or something. He works for the Washington Free Beacon. He does a wonderful job. There's, oh God, I'm just going to look up his name real quick because I want to make sure I get his name right because I can see him in my head. I want to say it's like Philip Chu or Jonathan Chu. That's C-H-O-E. He does an amazing job. I think he's on our side. He does stuff with Turning Point, which is I don't like Turning Point, but he basically is like an on the ground reporter about what's going on at protests and stuff. Stu Studio's on our side, even though Stu Studio's a Zionist, and I disagree with him on that. But you know what? Stu Studio does amazing work, incomparable. He's on our side. I think Trevor Loudon is on our side. I think Trevor Loudon does amazing analysis. I think he's got a great resource. So there are people on our side, okay? There are. There really are. Again, Elijah Schaffer. I like Elijah Schaffer. And again, I don't agree with Elijah Schaffer on everything. And by the way, guys, we're not supposed to agree with everyone on everything. That would be weird. That would be weird. What we're supposed to do is be able to exist in a place where we are able to be intellectually dishonest. I disagree with Elijah Schaffer on some stuff, but I think he's intellectually honest. I disagree with Nick Fuentes on some stuff. I think he's intellectually honest. I disagree with Stu Studio on some stuff. I think he's intellectually honest. I disagree with Benjamin Boyce on some stuff. I think Benjamin Boyce is intellectually honest. I think Benjamin Boyce is actually like on the side of the righteous, even though Benjamin Boyce has surrounded himself with questionable people, but that's, you know, he gets a lot of views from those people, and I think that he has nuanced conversations with those people, so we forgive him for that. No, Barry Weiss is not on our side. Barry Weiss is absolutely not on our side. No. Nope. Jimmy Dore is not honest. Do you know how I know Jimmy Dore is not honest? Jimmy Dore has lied about me. And when I proved Jimmy Dore wrong easily, without trying, Jimmy Dore refused to admit he was wrong and retract his lie. And if you want proof of that, you can find that proof on my YouTube channel. You can look up the video because I made a whole video about it, how he overtly lied about me on Twitter. He tried to drag me through the mud on Twitter because he was pissed off that I said something he didn't like. And then he lied about me to his massive audience. And then when I disproved the lie like 2 hours later without even trying very hard, Jimmy Dore refused to acknowledge it. So no, Jimmy Dore is not intellectually honest at all, and no one should trust a word that asshole says, because all he's doing is pushing political narratives that his friends want him to push. That's it. Sorry. Hate to be the person that destroys your hero, but that's just reality. Anyway, let's continue.
We are just asking questions about the reality of structural racism in society and the, you know, the oppression of men and women and blah, 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 blah.
And by the way, the left never says we're just asking questions. That is something that the left never actually says. Konstantin Kisin just made that up. What's his motivation? Money. Money. It's all about money, honey. Money.
That was the arguments that they made. I mean, you feel free to disagree because I've been talking.
Well, no, I mean, I think that that's a tactic that needs to be taken, or even saying that somebody's just asking questions and criticizing them for doing that is a tactic that's been taken against the IDW. Right, like, or Brett Weinstein is a perfect example.
Excellent,
he's just
Benjamin.
asking questions about these novel, medical.
Yeah, imagine if we allowed people to ask questions without instantly attacking them. Imagine if we had a society like that. Asking questions is woke, according to Konstantin Kisin.
Interventions, right? Or he's being an anti-vaxxer. He's jacking off, they call it, right? So I don't know how you how that's a stable criticism, because we're always already doing that.
No,
And
well, I don't agree
I guess
with
what you're
that.
saying is
I
like
don't
this.
think. Oh, sorry.
We're slipping something in, right? That's what you're implying, that they're slipping something in by just asking questions. But we are always just asking questions. We're freely decomposing.
I don't think we are.
No.
I certainly don't think we are. I thought that quite a few of us were making assertions about the fact that the truth exists, reality exists.
Yeah.
That
You are not the arbiter of truth and reality, Konstantin. And especially when I flat out know, bro, that you refuse to look at primary source evidence. You are absolutely not the guy who gets to decide what truth and reality is when you refuse to look at primary source evidence.
the presence or absence of systemic racism is something that can be measured. not perfectly, but can be measured.
Yeah.
That the
That's not
nature
what
of the
that
relationships between men and women isn't one of oppression and tyranny, but actually is complicated in ways that we can describe.
That's not what they're talking
and
about.
all of the woke talking points, I thought that those of us who agreed that wokeness was stupid and wrong were making quite a credible set of assertions about the way the world actually is. I don't think we were just asking questions while pretending that there is no truth. I thought what we were saying was these people are saying truth is a question of power. That's the woke argument, right?
Yeah.
That what is true is determined by who has control of society and who gets to brainwash everybody else.
That's not
what I thought.
That's not what they're saying. That Konstantin Kisin just said that the woke argument is that whoever has the most power gets to brainwash society. Guys, who has the most power on the woke left? What is power code for on the woke left? Pop quiz for the chat. When the woke left says power, what do they actually mean? I know this is going to come as a shock to anyone who might be new to this content, but when the left says power, what do they actually mean? They mean fucking capitalism, bro. They mean the bourgeois. They mean the oppressor class. The class that is oppressing. The capitalist class. The people with the most private property. The bourgeois. That's what they mean, Konstantin. Why don't you know this? You've been studying the left diligently for years, bro. You have a whole show about it. You became famous studying the left and teaching people about it. Why don't you know that this is all code for capitalism? They're talking about the bourgeois. Everything is about capitalism. Everything.
The IDW was about. I thought the IDW was about saying, no. There actually is truth. And we can attempt to reach it by the exercise of free speech, by the exercise of research, by the statistical evidence before us, and all of these other things.
Yeah.
So that's what I don't see the parallel there.
But when we're describing systems of power, we see political truth. I don't even know if that makes sense. Power operates through narrative, right? You mobilize democracy by everybody agreeing on a story and behaving within that story and then acting out that mythology over and over again. So to undermine that can cause chaos, but you're not necessarily describing, like with World War II, like what's the truth of World War II? There's so many different stories. And that's kind of my reaction to you, to your video about, the woke riot and Daryl Cooper. When I listened to his response to the critics, I heard a man just describing some horrific events that happened. And his argument was that just because Hitler was wrong doesn't mean that Churchill was all right. And to look through the complexities and challenge the narrative, this comic book narrative that's kind of set in the American imagination, like Captain America defeats Hitler, is not the way that things actually shook out. So when we question those narratives, I don't see it as, I guess the process of finding truth in history is really messy. And I don't see anybody being able to completely understand.
Well, this is the other lie that was told in the Tucker interview, this idea that these are forbidden fruit that have not been picked and can't be discussed. And this is
Konstantin, you literally attacked him for interviewing someone that you don't like. What are you talking about? Guys, don't worry. This is not really forbidden fruit. I'm just trying to cancel someone and calling them woke right because they talked about these ideas.
This is all complete nonsense, right?
Yeah.
I'm 41 years old. When I was a young boy going through the British education system, we were taught history terribly, admittedly. And I went to a pretty good school and taught history terribly. But nonetheless, one of the things that we discussed ad nauseum, frankly, it's one of the few things that anyone remembers who went through education in history in this country during that time, is the conversation about why the Nazis came to power. The Treaty of Versailles, how badly Germany was treated. There have been dozens of books written about this. So it's not like these conversations haven't been happening.
That
the
has
issue
nothing
I
to do
take
with
the
Churchill.
Daryl Cooper interview is that the things he's saying are simply not factually correct. They're just not true. So the question I would put to you is,
Churchill wasn't responsible for firebombing Dresden. Is that what we're saying? Churchill wasn't responsible for firebombing Dresden?
Are you saying there's no such thing as the truth about World War II?
No, I'm saying that a lot rests on interpretation of history. A lot rests on that.
But it is either true or not that Churchill played with toy soldiers as a 60-year-old.
It is either true or not that Churchill firebombed Dresden, killing hundreds of thousands of civilians for no good reason. That's either true or not, Konstantin. That's either true or not.
In the prime minister's office, right? That's either true or it's false.
Okay.
And if it wasn't Churchill that did it, who the fuck did? Because someone did it.
Was either financed by rich Zionists or he wasn't. He was either the chief villain of World War II or that was someone else.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah. Yeah, that's true. But the amount of energy released from the reaction to that interview, it's obscured. Like, what is being combated? Is it these some wry sayings that he did? He admittedly said that he's being controversial by saying that Hitler or not Hitler, Churchill is the.
Of course, he's being controversial. He's implying that the guy who stopped Nazism is the chief villain of World War II. Yeah, that's pretty controversial.
Bro.
A, because it's incredibly not true.
Bro.
And B, of course, it's incredibly offensive to millions of people whose family suffered and died in World War II.
And now here it is. Here it is. The guy who claims to fight wokeness is honestly arguing that you have the right to not be offended by someone else's ideas. Does anyone remember the argument that the right was making against the left in 2020? Oh, wait, I do. Because a lot of people on the left in 2020 were offended anytime someone said something that they didn't like. And they were actually asserting that they had the right to not be offended by other people's words. That's like what political correctness is, right? It's this idea that somehow you have the right to go through your entire day without being personally offended by something that someone else says. Konstantin Kisin literally just said, well, you offended millions of people with these ideas. Guess what, Konstantin? You do not have the right to go through your entire life without being offended by someone else's ideas. And if you don't like it, all you have to do is not listen, bro. That's it. You don't have the right to not be offended. I don't have the right to not be offended. Benjamin Boyce doesn't have the right to not be offended. This is not an intellectual argument, Konstantin. This is an emotional argument. Let's just listen to that again. Guys, millions of people were offended at the fact that Tucker Carlson interviewed a historian. Let's all clutch our pearls in unison. Because we really believe that we shouldn't have to live in a world where we might be offended by someone.
Pretty controversial. A, because it's incredibly not true, and B, of course, it's incredibly offensive to millions of people whose family suffered and died in World War II to defeat Nazism under the leadership of someone like Winston Churchill.
And by the way, just so we're clear, my grandfather fought in World War II, so I don't want to hear shit about this, Konstantin. You just told me that because I had a family member that fought in World War II, that I have the right to, like, go through life without being offended. So I don't want to hear shit about your opinion about what I have to say about all this.
Mm-hmm. Of course, that's the reaction. And what's funny to me is the response that you're portraying to me, and you playing devil's advocate or not, I don't know, it doesn't really matter, is kind of weird to me given, well, let me give you this example like this. Imagine what would happen if BLM activists let's say in the summer of 2020, started tearing down the legacy of great men who built America, how would Tucker Carlson have reacted? Do you think there might have been an energy release, as you put it? Wait, we actually don't need to go into that hypothetical, because we know how Tucker Carlson would have reacted to that scenario, because that's exactly what happened in the summer of 2020. And he did segment after segment on his show, which I watched with great pleasure, by the way, because he was right about that. Making fun of these people, mocking these people, explaining why they're wrong, attacking them linguistically, and undermining their argument. So, of course, when you attack one of the greatest men in the history of our civilization with lies, people are going to react to that. Yes.
Okay. And so what is the point, from your perspective, of the questioning of these narratives, these historical figures? Well, they're not beyond criticism? You're not saying that, right?
No, God, no. And this is my point, is dozens of books have been written by actual historians, as in people who go into archives and study history properly. They don't just read.
So now Konstantin Kisin is the arbiter of how to properly study history. It seems to me that Daryl Cooper's pretty well read. It seems to me that Daryl Cooper seems to have a podcast that's popular with a lot of people, where he brings a certain perspective from reading a variety of perspectives about history to explain what he thinks happened. Why, again, does Konstantin Kisin, who is a failed comedian, why does Konstantin Kisin get to be the arbiter of who is and is not studying history properly based on whether or not he likes their conclusion? We're only 20 minutes into this interview. I'm already like, I don't know how Benjamin Boyce is sitting there with a straight face. I really don't.
The books of other people, as this guy does. They're people who actually study history. History isn't reading books by historians. Do we understand that?
Hey, Konstantin, I'm willing to show you primary sources about the left anytime, bro. Let me know. Let me know. Because, Konstantin, you study the left based on Fox News, The Daily Wire, Blaze TV, and libs of TikTok. That's how you study the left, bro. I can show you primary sources about the left any day, bro. Since you get to be the arbiter of how people study history, I get to be the arbiter of how people study the left. And so if you ever want actual primary sources from actual leftist training, from actual leftist activists, not clickbait bullshit on the internet, you let me know, bro. You let me know. You know how to get in touch with me, Konstantin. Oh, wait, you blocked me on all the platforms for daring to provide you those primary sources the first time I did.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Right. So this guy he's not, I don't know why he does it. I'm sure that one of the reasons he does it, look, you can tell a lot about why somebody, you can tell a lot about somebody by what they assume about other people. My assumption about other people, I hear lots of talk on the internet about how people are grifters and they have opinions for money and all this stuff. I find that very difficult to believe. Because I just can't conceive of doing that myself, right?
Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, okay. Okay, Konstantin. All right. Okay, sure. Yeah, yeah, sure.
Right. So my view, and this is mind reading, so it could be completely wrong and it's got to be taken with the grain of salt. But my assumption, let's say it's not my view, my assumption would be that this guy has read a lot of books that he found interesting. He likes a different perspective. And then he found that when he puts this perspective on the internet, it gets lots of attention and he becomes successful and he can make money and he can go on big shows and that, you know.
Okay, so Daryl Cooper is a well-read person who makes a podcast on the internet that people like, that earn him money, And then people like his perspective. Even my dog's pissed off. People like his perspective. So then they bring him on shows to talk about his perspective, which gets him even more viewers to his podcast, which makes him even more money because someone seems to like what he's doing. And this is why we're personally offended by it, Konstantin. This is why you get to be the arbiter of what is true and what is not true, and who is a historian and who is not a historian. Because Daryl Cooper has a podcast that you disagree with. Yeah, Konstantin Kisin. We must cancel him. He's not a real historian. Also, Konstantin Kisin. I swear I'm not on the woke right, bro. They're on the woke right. It's not me. It's them.
No, that's a perfectly understandable motivation for his doing that. In Tucker's case, I suspect the motivation, again, I don't know Tucker personally. I haven't discussed this. We've invited him on our show many times, including to discuss this. He hasn't, look, he's a busy guy. He's got a tour. His channel has 3 million subscribers. Ours only has 1. So, maybe we're not big enough, whatever. It doesn't matter. My sense is he has become very frustrated with the direction of Western societies in the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
They talk about this in their conversation. And so he's looking for alternatives. The other thing that is quite clear to me, and again, this is mind reading, so it might be completely wrong, but it's clear to me based on what I've heard him say, is that he is incredibly, I was going to use the word traumatized, and that may be excessive, but he's incredibly unhappy at the fact that he supported and propagandized, frankly, for the war in Iraq. Right? And that thing of fool me once, shame on me, shame on you, fool me. Fool me. I did a George Bush there, but you know what?
You did. Yeah. It's hard not to.
Right. But basically, you don't want to get fooled again. And so then you start questioning everything. And you go, well, maybe I got sold this lie that I then told to other people. Well, let's make sure that and this is the thing with Tucker. He's incredibly intelligent and well-read, right? So he's not doing this out of stupidity. So that's my sense. There is a portion of the right that is so frustrated with the direction of the Western world that they are starting to, what I would say, go off the deep end. And they're deploying some of the woke tactics. Sorab calls them the barbarian right because he sees in them a kind of Nietzschean.
There's that aspect. Yeah,
there's that aspect to it, undoubtedly, and we can all see that if we're paying attention. And so I think that's probably the motivation for Tucker, and there's lots of other dimensions to it. So if you're asking me why people do certain things, it's hard to know, but those are my assumptions.
Let him talk,
we can just say that you don't think that they are channeling their frustration properly, but there is something to be frustrated about.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So what is the counter to that? What's the proper way to stay on the shallow end, as it were?
Well, I wouldn't say it's the shallow end. I would like us to stay in the main part of the swimming pool, if we're extending the metaphor. But
Konstantin would like us to stay within a very specific Overton window. That Konstantin would like to be the arbiter of what that Overton window is. That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. I would like them to stay in the main part of the swimming pool if we're using a metaphor. He's talking about the Overton window. You can talk about anything as long as it's within the Overton window. But the minute that you start to go into the deep end of the swimming pool, then we're going to have a fucking problem, aren't we, Konstantin?
Yeah. Okay.
In my view, the right way to counter that is to be honest about the problems we face, and the problems they talk about are mass immigration and illegal immigration. Yeah. And to say that the answer to that is to go back to the founding principles of our civilization, which are what? They are that, of course, we believe in the equal dignity of all human beings, but countries are allowed to have borders. Illegal immigration is wrong, something that we all used to remember until 20 years ago. And in fact, in my book, I have a whole chapter called An Immigrant's View on Immigration, in which I quote left-wing politicians who were saying...
By the way, Konstantin Kisin doesn't live in America. People know that, right? Konstantin Kisin is a Russian Jew that lives in the United Kingdom. And I don't begrudge Konstantin Kisin being a Russian. I don't begrudge Konstantin Kisin being a Jew. I don't begrudge Konstantin Kisin living in the United Kingdom. My point is that I'm getting really fucking tired of people who are not Americans, who do not live in America, who have never lived in America, who will never live in America, make money commentating on American politics. Konstantin Kisin has no skin in the game in America. There is no incentive for him to be a productive part of the American conversation. Now, if Konstantin Kisin were going to move here and become an American citizen and pay taxes in America, that would be a different discussion. If Konstantin Kisin was actually going to put himself in a position of directly experiencing the consequences that happen via American politics, that would be a different discussion. But as it stands right now, Konstantin Kisin has nothing to do with America. He is not American. He will never be an American. He is a failed comedian that is living in the United Kingdom doing a show in the United Kingdom. So why the ever-loving F is he commentating on American politics, and why is he taken seriously? It's the same thing with Ian Miles Chung on Twitter. Ian Miles Chung is Malaysian. Ian Miles Chung does not live in America. He lives in Malaysia. Ian Miles Chung has never lived in America, is not going to be an American citizen, will never come here, will never pay taxes here, has no skin in the game here. Why the ever-loving fuck is he commentating on American politics? And why are people supporting these people? Billboard Chris is not an American. Billboard Chris is a Canadian. Billboard Chris does not live in America. Billboard Chris does not experience directly the ramifications of American politics. So why isn't Billboard Chris in Canada fighting gender ideology in Canada where he lives? All these foreigners coming into America when they have no skin in the game here, making money, being activists in the American system. Why are we allowing this?
10, 15, 20 years ago, how important it was to have a secure border and all of this other stuff, right? Yeah. So that's part of it. The other part of it is we have to maintain an overarching identity in our societies. America works because people can come from a different country, not speak the language, and by the time their kids are grown up, they take the Pledge of Allegiance, they swear to the flag, they serve in the American military, they believe in the values of America, they say that they are Americans. That's the point. And they stop being Hondurans or Haitians or Irish or whatever. They become American first and all of that other stuff second. Yeah. The same thing should be true and was true in Britain. And this is my own personal story. I came to the UK when I was 11 from Russia, having been brought up in the Soviet Union. I consider myself British. I speak the language. I understand the values, and I share them. I teach them, or will do, to my children as they get.
Were there a lot of other Russian kids around you, or were you kind of isolated?
No,
you were just thrown into British culture.
Well, actually, I had an interesting experience because at my school there was a clique of Russian-speaking kids. And at one point, when I was sort of struggling to find my way at school, I became very tempted to go in that direction. And my parents were very forceful with me about saying to me, we didn't send you to the UK using all the money we have for you to become a Russian in Britain. We sent you there to become British. That's your job. You're an immigrant. Your job is to adjust to the society to which we sent you and make yourself part of that society, which I've done. So that's the answer. The answer isn't to bring Eastern European authoritarianism to America or to Britain, not least because that's not going to work, right? And so I understand perfectly well people's frustrations with the liberal democracy in its current conception. But my view is that the reason that's happening is we have deviated very far from the values of our civilization, which we should reincarnate and reinstate and recenter, not go off in a completely different direction, the kind that...
Then why don't you fight that battle in the United Kingdom where they are much more in need of people fighting that battle now, why are you coming to America and telling Americans what ideas they can consider? Tucker Carlson is an American. Daryl Cooper, so far as I know, someone correct me if I'm wrong, is an American. We have freedom of speech in America. Tucker Carlson does not report to Konstantin Kisin, who is not an American. Daryl Cooper does not report to Konstantin Kisin. We are allowed to have conversations that Konstantin Kisin doesn't like, and Konstantin Kisin does not have the right to not be offended by those conversations.
Frankly, was the direction of travel in Europe in the 1930s, because it wasn't just Germany where these ideas were prevalent. Almost all of Europe, France, Germany, Portugal, Spain, a lot of Central and Eastern Europe, they all had massive fascist movements during that time, right? Yeah. So this barbarian side of things is always lurking, but I just don't think it's the right direction of travel. Do you?
Well, it seems like we are in a particular, if you subscribe to the kind of cyclical nature of human organizations, that seems to be the case that we are not in a democracy. We're in some sort of...
Yeah, this is another example. Jordan Peterson is not a fucking American. Jordan Peterson does not live in America. Why is Jordan Peterson working for a company that's funded by Zionists to commentate on American politics when he is not American? He has never been American. He doesn't live in America. He has no skin in the game in America. Why? Do people really think there are not smart psychologists in America that can be lifted up? And I'm not actually talking about me, by the way. I'm not actually talking about me in this particular case, because I don't want to do what these people do. I want to be able to fly under the radar as much as I possibly can. But there are a lot of really smart fucking American psychologists that would probably be better at what they're doing than Jordan Peterson is. Because Jordan Peterson kind of seemed to go out of his mind. And he doesn't believe in free speech anymore either. We saw that with Nick Fuentes and that whole incident with Michaela. Again, it really is all these non-American commentators who don't live in America, are not American citizens, who seem to be saying that Americans don't have the right to free speech.
Oligarchy, and there's a bunch of vested interests that have very little accountability to the people that they're controlling, and they are using the mask of democracy and elections, and they're complaining, like the Democrats in my country are constantly complaining about the end of democracy while completely ignoring the process and doing everything that they can to do that. So there's if you go back to Aristotle, there's these three forms.
Essentially what happened with Nick Fuentes and Jordan and Michaela Peterson, there's multiple videos about it on my channel, but what happened is that Jordan Peterson called Nick Fuentes a rat, and then Nick Fuentes called the Jews a rat or something like that, and then Michaela Peterson said that Nick Fuentes wasn't allowed to call people rats. And then Nick Fuentes was like, but your father just called me a rat last week or something like that. It was some stupid back and forth. And then Michaela Peterson kept doubling down and Nick Fuentes kept ratioing her on Twitter or something like that. But essentially, Michaela Peterson was telling Nick Fuentes that he wasn't allowed to do something that Jordan Peterson had done within a couple of weeks to Nick Fuentes.
Of government, and there's a good side and a bad side to each of them, and then
it's all coming back to me now. And then Jordan Peterson wrote a whole fucking poem about Nick Fuentes being a rat. This is real. Jordan Peterson wrote a 3-tweet sonnet about Nick Fuentes being a rat, and about how he was totally allowed to call Nick Fuentes a rat, even though Michaela Peterson was telling Nick Fuentes that he wasn't allowed to call people rats. Does everyone remember that? When Jordan Peterson wrote a whole sonnet calling Nick Fuentes a rat?
Worst one is tyrannical monarchy, but a benevolent monarchy is very efficient and very good. Something that Britain had until they outgrew it or tried to work out another way to do it. Then you have oligarchy, which is either an aristocratic, like the best people leading, or you have like these vested interests, which is what we have now. And then you have democracy, which is either mob rule or polity, where you have a citizenship who are, you know, like what Madison said about our Constitution, is that this is only for a certain type of people. This is for a self-governing people. And so when we talk about trying to fix these things, what I see is that it always comes down, if we are truly going to have liberty, that liberty has to stand on something. It has to stand on a set of virtues that are responsibility, right? It's not just freedom, it's responsibility. So how do you reimpose that? You can't, unless you go the tyrannical move. But you can't convince people to be Christians. You can't convince people to clean up their room, right? You can't force them. I guess
I know. I just spent 3 weeks on tour with a guy in America who's doing just that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So Peterson.
I mean, in general, I'm actually a big fan of monarchies. I think monarchies have a lot of benefits. I'm a royal nerd. Like, fun fact for people who don't know, like I'm kind of a little bit obsessed with royalty in Europe. I follow all the royal families. I like the system of monarchy in general because I think the system of monarchy provides stability. I also think it's kind of like when, like, it's like, take for example, Charles, the King of England right now, currently, Charles III. Charles was an apprentice for 70 years to his mother. Charles literally spent 70 years learning how to be king. Now, William is probably not going to spend 70 years learning how to be king, but William's probably going to be, you know, at least 50, if not 60, by the time Charles dies and William becomes king. That is a long-ass time to apprentice for a job. In that time, they get to meet all the world leaders. They build relationships with all the world leaders. That, like, I think the monarchy is something that can remain consistent regardless of, like, the governmental political change, so that even if other world leaders don't like your government, they still like the king or the queen, and they have a good relationship with the king or the queen, and so they're not going to screw that up. The king or the queen can always pick up the phone and be like, can we just stop? There was also a thing in terms of, like, my dogs are not happy with monarchy. I've only ever heard arguments between familiar monarchy versus a constitutional monarchy. I mean, there are other types of monarchies out there, but, like, okay, so consider this. During the truckers' strike in Canada a couple years ago, I don't know what my dog is upset about. I think my husband just came home. During the truckers' strike in Canada a couple years ago, basically, Justin Trudeau was not allowed to call out the military on the truckers, because Justin Trudeau probably would have called out the military on the truckers if he was allowed to. Why wasn't he allowed to call out the military on the truckers? Does anyone know? Why wasn't Justin Trudeau not allowed to call out the military on the truckers in Canada? Does anyone know? I'm honestly curious. Maybe there's some Canadians in the chat that know. We'll get back to this interview in a sec, but I'm honestly curious. Does anyone know? I don't see anyone chatting in. Let me check over on Rumble. No, I don't see anyone chatting in there with an answer. Yup, 'cause of the Queen. 'Cause of the Queen. Exactly, because Canada is part of the British monarchy. The Queen of England at the time, it was Elizabeth was the Queen of Canada. Charles is currently the King of Canada. The military is in Your Majesty's service. The Queen would have had to make the decision or give permission to utilize the military on the Canadian truckers, which she was never, ever, 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 ever in this universe going to do. So that's, like, one of the benefits of a monarchy is, like, the military cannot really be used on the people because the military reports to the queen or the king, whoever they may happen to be. And if the king or queen decides to use the military on their people, they're probably going to get removed from that job rather quickly and maybe even off with their head. So, I mean, I think there are a lot of benefits to monarchy. I don't know. I don't have full thoughts on it beyond now, but I like royalty. And if we ever have monarchy in the United States, I want there to be robes and crowns and pomp and circumstance and jewels and fancy outfits. And I want there to be ritual. I want to have a whole coronation thing. I'm a big fan. I think it's good.
So I guess what, Peterson brought him into the conversation. He's inspiring. You inspire responsibility.
Yes.
And how do you inspire that? I guess like in the right sphere, they do a lot of bodybuilding and they do a lot of self-improvement and they criticize the longhouse, they criticize the laziness of our society, and they're trying to find a core. And I don't know to what degree they're doing that, for good or for bad, we'll see. But it's true that what we have now is not working, and it's careening into decay and possibly world war. How do you stop that?
Well, the question is, first and foremost, everything has to be understood in comparison, right? So when you say it's not working, I agree with you that there is a lot to be frustrated about.
Okay.
Okay. But to go further, then we have to ask the question, not working compared to where? This is why Tucker Carlson goes to Russia.
Okay.
Yes? Are we together on this?
Well, that would be a good tactic to kind of try to step out to critique something that you're in.
Well, no, because you're looking for an alternative, right? Because you have to compare to something else. And that something else has to be better. Otherwise, you can't really say that.
I was on mute when I said that because my dog was barking. You're not necessarily looking for an alternative. You're looking for a contrast. Those are two different things. Just because you're looking for a contrast doesn't mean you're looking for an alternative.
The thing you have is not good. Yes?
Well, you could go to another country or you can go to the past. A lot of people go to the 50s or have like the 90s is what we want now. It's like, can't we just go back to the 90s, right?
But you and I think would both recognize that you can't go back to the past because the circumstances of the past were very different. We didn't have mass communications in the way that we now do. Our perception.
Konstantin is trying very hard. Bro, you're ranting in my chat and I don't like it. Please cut it out. Like, no, you are not even commenting on things that are relevant. I'm putting you in a 5-minute timeout. I don't want to see any more of that shit. So what Konstantin is trying to do is bring Benjamin Boyce along an argument that Konstantin is making that is intellectually dishonest, and Benjamin Boyce isn't going with him, which I think is funny.
Of things being terrible are partly driven by the fact that we now see lots of terrible things that we never used to see before. If I didn't have my smartphone and I walked out in the lovely little town in which I live in southern England, I'd probably think everything's fucking great. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, I think about that every time I'm in traffic. I'm like, look at how good we have it. We're all stuck in traffic together.
I think that's part of it. And so we have to ask the question, well, everything is bad, breaking down, blah, all the things that you said, compared to where? Because this is the question I've been asking the woke left for the last 6 years. When they say America and Britain are the most racist countries in the world, they're the most sexist countries in the world, homophobic, I say, okay, I agree with you that some people are...
Konstantin Kisin has not yet figured out he has a different definition of racism than the left. There are two possibilities for the circumstances in which we find ourselves. Either we must believe that Konstantin Kisin has been talking about the left for years, has been studying the left for years, has been interviewing everyone and their mother about the left for years, and yet he still has no idea what the definitions are of the words the left uses. So maybe Konstantin Kisin was just a horrible content creator and interviewed all the wrong people, and he interviewed not a single person who knew what the left was doing, and he had no access to this information at all, even though I sent it to him. That's one eventuality, that Konstantin Kisin just had a real string of bad luck where he interviewed all the wrong people for years. Or, alternatively, Konstantin Kisin knows what is going on the left And he is making the conscious choice to lie to people about it because it advances a brand and a narrative that Konstantin Kisin wants to sell. Which one of those is worse? That Konstantin Kisin did such a shitty job at informing people that he interviewed all the wrong people and he never quite got to the correct definitions that the left is using for these words, and thus he wrongly informed people for years just because he interviewed ignorant person after ignorant person after ignorant person, and he never bothered to go to the primary sources while judging what everyone else is doing in terms of studying history? Or is it worse that Konstantin Kisin damn well fucking knows who the left is and how they define words, and yet he's choosing to lie to people? A lot of people seem to think that number 2 is worse.
Bigoted, and some people don't like gays and whatever. Where would you rather be a woman? Where would you rather be black? Where would you rather be gay? And that's the point at which they go, and they have nothing to say. Now, the question I'm putting to the hypothetical Tucker Carlson is not present.
Has Konstantin Kisin ever bothered to consider that maybe the reason the left has nothing to say to these ideas is Konstantin Kisin is not properly defining the words? And so the left is like, what the fuck are you even talking about, bro? Because they have a completely different meaning of the words than Konstantin Kisin does?
Here is, do you really believe that Russia is a better place for people to live today than America? That's the real question. And if you're Tucker Carlson, you are not able to answer that question objectively. And one of the reasons is that you're so famous and powerful that when you go to Russia, you're not actually going to Russia. You're getting a Potemkin village experience, right? The Potemkin village is this traditional Russian thing. You know this, but just in case some people in your audience don't, where the czars of Russia would often be taken to places where they would be shown these beautiful, pretty villages so that they would think that their citizens were living great lives. The villages were fake. They were fake fronts that would be moved together with the royal procession. So when Tucker Carlson goes to Moscow and sees beautiful, clean streets and train stations and whatever, those things are accurate. They are true. But the fact that he doesn't even recognize that American supermarkets also have shopping carts that you can return with a coin, which is amazing to him, just shows his level of ignorance. So about that particular issue. So my point to you is, yes, I agree with you. And I've been one of the people, I hope that's clear to people who know me over the last many years, who's been pretty prominent about saying we're traveling in the wrong direction. But we nonetheless have to keep in perspective the fact we're still doing better than everybody else. Right?
You're not in America.
Are we agreed on that or not? Because
for the time being, I mean, I don't want to be in China, but they don't have problems that we have. But how do they solve?
They have some other problems,
right?
Yeah, those are the trade-offs. Now, look, nobody would pretend there are no bad trade-offs to democracy, particularly democracy in the stage or phase or whatever it is that we're in at the moment. Nobody would disagree with that. However, you've got to understand that Russia isn't better than the United States for people to live in. Life is much harder. People's life expectancy is much lower. Their quality of life is much lower. If you're a man, you're quite likely to be sent off to die in someone else's war that you probably didn't want to be part of at the moment. If you're a woman, you should know that Russia decriminalized domestic violence recently. And all of the other things that we in the West consider, important and take for granted don't exist in Russia. Yes, of course, a form of government where one man has been in power for 25 years creates more stability in some ways, although I'd argue that Russia being embroiled in the largest war in Europe since World War II may not be that stable. But people are much poorer, much worse off, have terrible lives by comparison. They have far less freedom. And if your concern is, the fact that people in America are less free to express their opinions, which is my concern, it's true that they are. There's some sort of racing convention outside my house. I apologize for that.
Oh, fun.
It's not. It's just some idiot on the street. But anyway, so my point is, yes, the direction of travel of the West is not great, and I'm as frustrated about it as you or Tucker or anyone else, that does not make those other places better. And so what that tells me is, yes, we've got to find ways to fix what we've got going on, and we can talk. You know, if I could solve that, I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you, I think. But what I see when I look at China or Russia or any other alternative that you want to offer me is that those countries are not doing better. Therefore, why on earth would we give up the central values and freedoms that we have fought for centuries in order to pursue the outcomes that they have when we know that those outcomes are not better? Because all we're then doing is simply looking and thinking the grass is greener on the other side. And let's say you install a Putin-like benevolent dictator, if we're even going to call him a benevolent dictator in the United States. That's not going to lead to a better world, particularly on a long time scale, because you've got to remember dictatorships, one of the problems with them is you might pick a really good dictator for a while. You might have a great dictator. But what happens when his time comes and you get a bad dictator?
Yeah. You go from Augustus to Nero eventually. That's what you're saying.
Right. Yeah.
Could we pause on the Ukraine thing? Because it's something that's really happening out there in the world. I'm so far removed from it. I don't know what my opinion should be on that. And I don't know if I should have an opinion on that. Right. So, but you have much.
Hang on. We got a super chat from Dragon Balls. Thank you, Dragon Balls. Fun fact. A British question is different from an American question. It's a mini struggle session. The question is never the question. Thank you for that, Dragon Balls. I appreciate you as always. Hey guys, if you are appreciating me ripping Konstantin Kisin a new asshole on this, you know, maybe nothing will ever happen with it. But you know, feel free to send in a $5, $10 super chat, something to support the stream. Help me get to my streaming goal for today. I really appreciate it. Or at least mount the like button for me. Make sure the like button is mounted. That would be helpful too.
More, you're personally tied to it because you by your lineage, and you're also much closer to it. So there is this narrative, or this challenging of this narrative, like Ukraine is, you know, from my leadership, they say that Ukraine, we need to support Ukraine because we need to end Russian tyranny or something like that. But then there's this other kind of narrative about NATO's kind of teasing Russia constantly. And so it's a big mess. And all I see in my feed is this terrible drone war happening. And then yesterday there's phone wars now. And I'm worried, when is my government going to start deploying drones and blowing up my phone because they think I'm an enemy of the state? I'm not saying I'm on any side with Hezbollah or anything like that, but I see this ratcheting up.
That's a good question. We're so excited that Israel blew a bunch of people up using little electronics that they planted explosives in. But we seem to think that will never be used against us if we don't do what they want us to do.
Of warfare. And it's way over there. I don't know what, but I see Americans treat these foreign wars as a sport. We put the flags in our bio, and we're playing out this mythology where everything's freedom because it's tyranny. So just asking questions like, is it really freedom versus tyranny? And should we let Russia do what Russia does? Do we need to be involved in this? Should I be personally involved in this? What's your take?
I don't think you should sign up for the Ukrainian army if that's what you're asking. I think you're better placed doing what you're doing now. But look, it's a very big and complicated thing. I don't know that we're going to cover.
Yeah, we don't have to get too into it, but I mean, I'm just trying to play out, like, if we're just going to ask questions about these, right?
All the points you're making are fair in the sense that I think it's absolutely true that the Western world has very good reasons to deter Russian westwards expansion. I also think it's true that Russia sees NATO and the Western powers as the aggressors in this conflict. And what I see playing out is that there's a kind of battle of civilizations over a border area. I mean, Ukraine Ukraina literally means by the border or the borderland, or some, people will get upset with me from both sides but that's basically, it's the borderland. This chunk of land has been fought over for centuries because it sits on the boundary between the Eastern Christian civilization and the Western Christian civilization. And what's happening is, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine naturally, like many other former Soviet countries to the west of Russia, like Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, others, have gradually been moving westwards in their ideology, in their thinking, in their attitudes, in their values, etc. And Russia...
Actually, you know what, Sandy, this is a really great point. And Konstantin Kisin likes to say, it's either true or it's not true. But sometimes that's just not the case. Sometimes there is a deliberate framing of a conversation. Konstantin Kisin says Russia is expanding westward. Why is he pointing out that the reason that he might perceive that Russia is expanding westward is because Russia is trying to prevent NATO from expanding eastward? Because both those things are true. This entire problem is because Ukraine was trying to join NATO to expand NATO eastward. Russia doesn't want Ukraine to join NATO, which is why they started expanding westward. So it seems to me that the problem in this situation may not be Russia as much as it is NATO. And maybe if NATO didn't exist, then maybe Russia would have settled the fuck down and have not gone into Ukraine to prevent them from joining NATO.
Sees that, or some people in Russia see that, the people who are in charge of Russia see that as a direct product of Western manipulation. CIA and blah, 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 dropping, pride leaflets everywhere, and suddenly all the Ukrainians.
Are you fucking serious? First of all, I'm not Ukrainian, asshole. So there's no possible way that I can be a traitor to Ukraine. Second of all, you're fucking blocked. Go away. What the fuck? Seriously? Hey, thanks to ladies for becoming a member of the YouTube channel. I appreciate you.
A trans or whatever. Again, parody, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So the way the West sees this is, look, Ukrainians had freedom and they chose to move westwards. So it's our job to help them. This is their 1776 moment. Look at America. America didn't become independent. Your Revolutionary War, you had support from the French and the Spanish. Yeah. Right? So
for their own reasons, right? They weren't just signing up for liberty. They wanted a piece of the pie.
Quite right. Quite right. So America would sign up to support the Ukrainians, because they see them moving in the direction of the Western world, number one. Number two, it is in America's interest to peel territory off Russia and to prevent it from becoming a great power that's taking more and more chunks of Western Europe, or Eastern Europe in this instance, right? So this is the battle that's happening. And you can the people who say NATO expansion has aggravated Russia are right. It has. The people who say, by the way, NATO expansion is partly the result of the greed of Western military industrial corporations are also right, because one of the reasons that it makes sense to expand NATO is that when an Eastern European country like Latvia or Ukraine or whatever becomes a member of NATO, they have to take all of their Soviet-derived armaments, throw them in a garbage can, and tool up the entire army with Western weapons, which are made by American corporations, right? So that's also true. But so we can talk about the fact that the West should have been more careful, more cognizant of the threat to Russia. Putin warned that this was a step too far. These are all not invalid points at all. But at the same time, once Putin invades Ukraine, there's a very strong incentive for the West to prevent that from being unpunished very significantly, and to prevent that from being very significantly deterred. So it fundamentally depends on your view of the world. Do you want America and its allies to remain the dominant powers on the Western continent, on the European continent? Or do you want to allow a gradual slippery slope where that hegemony is challenged? And for me, this comes down to the fact, sorry, to just one final point. I have lots of family in Ukraine. I have lots of family in Russia. I don't like the fact that there's a war. But the question is, what do the Ukrainians want? That's also a big question no one talks about, right? Because, you know, the people who say, who I'm sure are pretty ever present in your feed, well, you know, the Ukrainians are just being used as pawns by the West and we're going to fight to the last Ukrainian. Well, the Ukrainians have agency, actually. They have agency, and they've exercised that agency pretty quickly. Vladimir Zelensky was elected in a democratic election. He enjoys incredible support in Ukraine, very, very high levels of support in the 90s, the last time I checked. And when I speak to Ukrainians, including people who are fighting on the front lines, but also people in just civilians, they believe that they want their country to defend itself.
Yeah, that's all true, by the way. I'm married to a Ukrainian. My brother-in-law is in the Ukrainian army. My husband's parents still live in Ukraine. Like, what Konstantin Kisin just said there is actually legitimately true. So, you know, broken clock is right twice a day, I suppose.
And that's why they're asking for support from the West. So then the question is, do you help these people, or do you let them get overrun by Russia?
No, this wasn't real. That's not real. That's not real. It really isn't. What happened is Russia sent people into those regions. And again, I know because my fucking family's there.
And, you know, these are very difficult choices, which all have, again, as we discussed, trade-offs. My view is that it's in our interest to help Ukraine defend itself. You know, the strategy and tactics dimension.
That being said, I absolutely disagree with Konstantin Kisin that it is our responsibility to help Ukraine defend themselves. And by the way, Konstantin Kisin is saying it's not the United Kingdom's responsibility, it's America's responsibility. America should have stayed the fuck out of it.
Of this is very complicated. We can get into that if you like, but you're right. It is a big mess. I think there are good arguments in both directions, but I come down very much on the side of the Ukrainians want to fight. We have the ability to help them, and we've got to deter Russian further aggression, including against Ukraine, because this is not the first time it's happened that Russia's bitten off a chunk of Ukraine.
How does it end? From your point of view, how does it end?
It ends the way I said the day the conflict started, which is that Ukraine is going to have to give away land for permanent security. And that means that either it joins NATO, which I think is incredibly unrealistic at this point, or more likely you get some kind of Korean-style scenario where there's a physical barrier of a demilitarized zone between Russia and Ukraine.
Well, I guess we'll see. Hey, thanks, two ladies. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more for you. Two ladies, don't. You do a lot, my friend. Your work is so valuable. And yes, from my first paycheck, you earned way more. If I could give more, I would. You're my eldest daughter's hero. Hey, I really appreciate it, two ladies. You know, I mean, I never want people to feel, I never want people to feel guilty if they can't afford to donate to what I'm doing. I never want you to have guilt for that, you know, and what we hope is that people who can financially support it will step up. And that way my work remains free for everyone. That is the goal, but I really appreciate it. It's very generous, and I appreciate all your support and all your help.
And that's really, from my perspective, again, a lot of Ukrainians would be upset with me for saying this, but it is my opinion true, and that's why I say it. As someone who really wants Ukraine to get the best deal possible. Ukraine was always fighting to keep as much land as possible in exchange for permanent security. Not words on a piece of paper, but the physical prevention of further Russian aggression, right? That's the best that's going to happen here. And in order to do that, you're going to have someone in the White House who knows how to negotiate these things. There's a very simple and obvious way that you get that deal, as far as I can tell. Very simple. Mm-hmm. You come to whoever is the next president of the United States needs to come together with Vladimir Putin and say, look, there's two options here. Either we do a deal that gives Ukraine the guarantee that you're never going to be able to do this again, in exchange for land, and it's got to be a fair deal. You get to keep Crimea, you get to keep some of the eastern regions you've conquered, whatever. Or I'm going to double down and we're going to give Ukraine everything. We're going to give them planes, tanks, fucking missiles, everything, so that they can actually retake the territory themselves. Do you want to keep this war going on that basis, or do you want to do a deal? That's how you do it.
Yeah. Is there any possibility of thermonuclear exchange from your point of view? Would Russia go in that direction?
I don't know why Benjamin thought he would go down
there's
road,
always the
whatever.
possibility of thermonuclear exchange, in the sense that we live in a world in which people have nuclear weapons. So to say that,
but is
there
upping
isn't-
the ante
really
or
boring. I don't actually
whatever
care about
America
Konstantin's
is doing
opinion on
now
this.
heading in that direction?
Well, let's look at the facts of that, right? So Vladimir Putin has drawn a number of red lines. If you give the Ukrainians this, then we're going to use all means at our disposal. If you do that, we're going to use all means at our disposal. If you give them planes, we're going to use all means.
Hey,
If you give them
Dylan,
tanks,
I
we've done all
appreciate
that. And he's done absolutely nothing about it.
Okay.
Right? So now, do we just then go, oh, yeah, you know what, let's just, why don't we give the Ukrainians, the green light to go and put the Ukrainian flag over the Kremlin? Then we're starting to edge there. But in terms of Ukraine defending its own land, I don't see that at all, not even remotely.
So what is, we kind of discussed, you kind of give a story of you kind of just rambled about Daryl Cooper's possible trajectory as content creator. We're both content creators. You started your channel
I love it.
probably with one purpose, and it's probably changed over time. Or has it, where did you begin and how have you developed? Like, what do you see yourself doing now? Because wasn't it kind of a comedy show, right?
No,
but
no.
Yes, it used to be a comedy show. Yes,
no, it wasn't.
You were trying to be funny and you weren't.
I don't know if you remember the first time you had me on, and we talked a little bit about this, but for me, it was really about, Francis and I were two comedians operating in a comedy industry, which in the UK, unlike America, where you've got an amazing comedy scene actually, was incredibly woke. And it was frankly starting to piss us off. And what's more, we couldn't really understand what was happening because it was very sudden, very, very sudden, this shift. We went from like the end of what we call the noughties, you call the 2000s, right? Yeah. When like the more rape jokes you had in your material, the better comedian you were considered to be. Yeah, so gross, offensive, everybody was incredibly offensive, to like the next 5 years where suddenly everyone became like, oh, I'm, and like totally pathetic and white.
How ironic. How ironic that Konstantin Kisin claims he got into this space because he was a comedian back when people were allowed to be offended. And then you weren't allowed to offend people anymore, and that's why Konstantin Kisin claims to have started his show. But just earlier in the presentation, Konstantin Kisin said, Daryl Cooper offended people. Kind of seems like you've, something's changed, Konstantin. Something has changed.
Men are evil all of a sudden and all of this other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
so
don't
initially,
offend him.
It was about trying to find out what the hell was happening in our society after Brexit, after Donald Trump got elected in 2016, etc.
So it was an inquiry.
It was an inquiry. And it was always based on the attempt to pursue the truth. This is why, we had the discussion earlier in this conversation about the importance of not only asking questions, but actually attempting to make assertions about what you think is true. We brought people on not to ask questions, but to challenge the people who were lying and pretending to be asking questions, but doing so in bad faith.
Yeah.
That was the mission. And that mission...
Everyone that asks questions that Konstantin Kisin does not like is doing it in bad faith.
It's frankly remained the same. Now, of course, you layer on top of that, we're all in the content creation business. That means part of it is about entertainment. So yes, we want our interviews to be enlightening and funny and whatever. And part of it is educational. First and foremost for me and Francis, we're trying to learn things about history and about science and about technology and about the world. But ultimately, the goal is to try and bring more understanding and truth into the world.
How has it changed you,
Yes.
this work? Develop certain parts of you or shape you in certain ways?
Well, of course, yeah. But more off screen than on screen, really, in the sense that, we have a team of 10 people working for us now.
Yeah.
So
you're a small
I'm
business
no longer
owner,
just
yeah.
presenter, I'm running a small business and we have people working for us. So that means I have to be, a good leader and a good recognizer. That's not a word, but you know what I mean. I have to be good at recognizing who might be a good employee and who might not, and who's struggling and who needs a arm around the shoulder and who needs a kick up the ass and all of that type of thing.
Yeah.
It's changed me in that it's forced me to think more carefully about what I think. So initially, my job was simply to ask questions of other people, but as I developed my own opinions more and more, which I always had, but they got kind of refined, part of my job is now also output. I express my opinion about things as well. And then, I am someone
For
who's
what
always
purpose?
been...
What's the purpose of expressing your opinion?
Nice.
Just to assert the truth, or
He's being
Yes.
so
to
nice.
Not to
shape
assert
public
the truth.
opinion, or
Not to assert the truth, but to get closer to it. This is why you and I are having this conversation. If you were just some guy who had a go at me randomly on Twitter that I didn't know, over my comments about Tucker, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But the reason I'm here is I suspect that as a result of this, I will probably refine my opinion somewhat about the things that we're saying. And so perhaps we can go back to that and you can offer me a critique of why you think I shouldn't call it the woke right, and more broadly, what you think is wrong with my approach.
Yes,
well,
please do. Please
very
do it.
grateful to have this opportunity, because
Please do it.
I didn't understand what you were trying to do. Because I listened to Daryl Cooper and I found him to be nuanced, and he's presenting some amazing material and he's doing very well. And it didn't seem like he was apologizing or defending Hitler.
True.
Or necessarily just trying to destroy Churchill just to destroy Churchill. He's dealing with tons of material and he's doing it very well. It's a very, very powerful.
Comes across
work.
very well. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and then I listened to you boxing him off and calling him a Hitler apologist after just listening to him saying, I'm not apologizing for Hitler. I'm trying to open things up. So
may I interject one thing, Benjamin?
Yeah, please.
I'm so sorry to interrupt.
So Konstantin Kisin is being intellectually dishonest, and he's getting called out for being intellectually dishonest. So what do we think Konstantin Kisin's about to do, guys? Benjamin Boyce, in the beautiful way that Benjamin Boyce does, just directly called out Konstantin Kisin for being intellectually dishonest. And now Konstantin Kisin has said, wait, Benjamin, what do we think? Let's see how much you guys have learned by watching me. What is Konstantin Kisin about to do? Because he knows that Benjamin Boyce just called him out on being intellectually dishonest. What is it? Yep, he's going to deflect. Konstantin Kisin is about to deflect. Konstantin Kisin is about to try to move the entire conversation away from what Benjamin Boyce just said. There's going to be some sort of excuse. All right, let's see. And I have no idea. I didn't watch this interview earlier, but let's see what happens.
Did you watch his interview with Tucker?
Yes.
I didn't watch that. I watched the.
Okay.
I did.
I'm going through.
This is kind of why
series.
This is probably why we're struggling, because if you watch that interview, that's what I'm talking about. Now,
for everyone who watched that interview with me last week on Friday, was Daryl Cooper a Hitler apologist in that interview with Tucker Carlson? Press 1 in the chat if Daryl Cooper was a Hitler apologist in that interview with Tucker Carlson. Press 2 in the chat if Daryl Cooper was not a Hitler apologist in that interview with Tucker Carlson. Only answer if you watched the interview. I'm expecting you all to remain intellectually honest. 1, if Daryl Cooper was a Hitler apologist in that interview. 2, if Daryl Cooper was not a Hitler apologist in that interview. Because we did watch it, Konstantin. Nope, it was good. No. Literally no one thought that Daryl Cooper was a Hitler apologist, Konstantin. It doesn't really matter if Benjamin Boyce has seen the interview, Konstantin. Literally doesn't matter. No one agrees with you. Literally no one agrees with you.
Does he then sound... he sounds very reasonable in terms of the way he speaks. But what he's saying is, as Neil Ferguson, who we're about to release an interview with just now, who is an eminent historian who's written extensively about World War II, he is simply regurgitating Nazi talking points from the 1930s and Nazi...
And there it is. Daryl Cooper is literally a Nazi. Benjamin Boyce calls Konstantin Kisin out on his intellectual dishonesty. Benjamin Boyce directly points out that Daryl Cooper has said, "I'm not apologizing for Hitler." Konstantin Kisin says, wait, Benjamin. Don't you understand that Daryl Cooper is literally a Nazi? Can we just watch that happen again? Can we just go back and watch that play out in real time right in front of us? There it is. He's literally a Nazi, guys. Okay, let's watch again. We'll start with Benjamin calmly calling Konstantin out.
I didn't understand what you were trying to do. Because I listened to Daryl Cooper and I found him to be nuanced, and he's presenting some amazing material and he's doing very well. And it didn't seem like he was apologizing or defending Hitler or necessarily just trying to destroy Churchill just to destroy Churchill. He's dealing with tons of material and he's doing it very well. It's a very, very powerful.
Comes across very well. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and then I listened to you boxing him off and calling him a Hitler apologist after just listening to him saying, "I'm not apologizing for Hitler. I'm trying to open things up." So
may I interject one thing, Benjamin?
Yeah, please.
I'm so sorry to interrupt.
So, yeah.
Did you watch his interview with Tucker?
I didn't watch that. I watched the, I'm going through.
This is kind of why
series.
This is probably why we're struggling, because if you watch that interview,
Literally said struggling.
That's what I'm talking about. Now, does he then sound... he sounds very reasonable in terms of the way he speaks. But what he's saying is, as Neil Ferguson, who we're about to release an interview with just now, who is an eminent historian who's written extensively about World War II, he is simply regurgitating Nazi talking points from the 1930s.
He's literally a Nazi. Did you hear that? Did you hear? He's like, the reason we're struggling. Konstantin Kisin just that was like an amazing Freudian slip, because Konstantin Kisin is trying to struggle session Benjamin Boyce. I hope everyone knows that, right? So we were wrong. Konstantin Kisin didn't deflect. Konstantin Kisin did the classic SJW double down. Like, no, Benjamin, you don't understand. I'm not calling Daryl Cooper a Hitler apologist. I'm calling him a literal Nazi. He's not a Hitler apologist, but he is a Nazi. Konstantin is using the woke playbook there. Yeah, while calling everyone else the woke right. Yeah, you're based conservative podcaster, sir. Exactly. Unbelievable.
And Nazi apology talking points from the 1940s onwards.
Wait, no, he is still a Nazi apologist. I'm sorry, I ended the clip early. Not only is he a literal Nazi, he's also a Nazi apologist. Uh-huh.
But if you didn't listen to that interview, then perhaps you would have got a different impression. But someone who says that Churchill's motivation, first of all, that Churchill wanted World War II, and the reason he wanted it is that his Zionist backers bribed him, that's quite an extreme claim to make, no matter how calmly and persuasively you make it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was responding to.
I guess, I've seen him write about that particular assertion that he made about Hitler being bailed out by certain vested interests who also are suing for recognition of Israel, or who were Zionists. So to what degree did they...
So there's truth and then there is untruth, Konstantin. Was Churchill financially backed by Zionists or wasn't he? Because if there is evidence that Churchill was financially backed by Zionists, then what Daryl Cooper said is true. Now, you might not like that it's true. You might not like the language that he used. But it kind of seems as though there might be evidence that Winston Churchill was financially backed by Zionists. And whether or not that fundamentally fits the narrative you want to tell, that doesn't really matter. Facts don't care about your feelings.
Influence Churchill, I think, is an open question. I don't
open
know
how. How is it open?
If Churchill's being...
If someone is financially backing you, then they are probably influencing you.
Supported by people who want a certain outcome, then is there any causation between
what's the
these
evidence
people...
that he was being funded by Zionist financiers?
Daryl Cooper, and I don't have the facts, Daryl Cooper was writing about some backers. Churchill was in a lot of debt, and he got his debt taken care of. And these people were...
Churchill was in a lot of debt all of his life, but the way he took care of that is, I don't know if you know this, Churchill's manor house is actually around the corner from where I live, so I've been to Chartwell a couple of times. He wrote more words in the English language than Shakespeare.
You think Churchill paid down his debt by writing books? I don't know who needs to hear this. With extraordinarily rare exception, you do not make millions of dollars writing books. You just don't. Most people write books because they can't not write books. That is why most people write. It is not to become a millionaire. Most people who write books, even if they are absolutely prolific, do not make a significant amount of money writing books. Benjamin needs to work on his poker face. Yeah, this is a pretty great freeze frame, if I do say so myself. This might be one of my greatest freeze frames of all time. Yep. Churchill definitely wasn't backed by Zionists. He just wrote books. All right.
He wrote books, articles, all sorts of things. He was a
Stephen King's
writer.
written more than Shakespeare.
Who?
So, I mean, Stephen King, he's an American horror author, but...
yes, no, I know Stephen King, yes. Yeah. Yes, but my point is that Churchill, one of the reasons Churchill was such a prolific writer is that he needed that money. But the idea that Churchill took the British Empire to war because he was puppeteered by some Zionists...
That's
quite an extraordinary, slanderous.
I didn't hear him say it in that way.
That's exactly what he said in that interview with Tucker. That's literally what he said.
There's a through line from
slandering
these. I don't know.
He was asked the question: what motivated Winston Churchill to want a second world war? And he said he went.
Hey, Konstantin. Purely by coincidence, Churchill wrote a multi-volume piece about World War II. Incidentally, do you know what Churchill doesn't mention once in those books? You know, Brucey, we might be using we might be like, so this is Brucey's chat. I'm obviously not using these talking points. I'm just displaying Brucey's chat on the screen, but does anyone want to take a guess about what Winston Churchill doesn't mention in his multi-volume piece about World War II? Do you want to know what's not mentioned once in the multi-volume set that Churchill wrote about World War II? Something really specific. Maybe we should just let people Google that. Maybe I shouldn't say that on YouTube. Maybe we should just let people Google that. People can do their own research. People can ask questions.
To the Zionist argument. That's what he did. It's an extraordinary slanderous and libelous claim based on no evidence that I can see whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Which is, again, gives you the impression that this is Hitler apologia and Nazi talking points.
Well, that is a Nazi talking point, absolutely. And it was a claim that has been made, was made as, I believe, you'd have to fact check me on this, but I'm pretty sure this is one of the things that Goebbels actually was putting out during World War II. That Churchill's only doing this because he's being bankrolled by the Jews.
Yeah.
But was Churchill being bankrolled by the Jews? Is the question. And listen, I actually don't know the answer to this either way. I really don't know the answer to this either way. But Konstantin Kisin wants to point out there is truth and then there is untruth in Konstantin Kisin's world. So was Churchill being bankrolled by the Jews or wasn't he? I don't know. But there is an answer to that question. And if the answer to that question is not an answer that Konstantin Kisin likes, that doesn't actually make Daryl Cooper a neo-Nazi.
So I don't know
and quite frankly, I find it really hard to believe that Daryl Cooper just invented that out of nowhere. And he didn't see that documented in like multiple places. I just find that hard to believe. He seems like a really nuanced, pragmatic guy. Maybe he did just invent it. Maybe he just read some piece of Hitler propaganda. I don't know.
Facts. I'm not here to dispute them because you're steamrolling me, obviously, and I can't present Daryl Cooper's case.
Sorry, it's not my intention to steamroll you.
No.
I think if you haven't
I'm pointing out to the audience that
yes,
I'm pointing out to the audience that I obviously watched the wrong. I prepared wrong. I was watching some other things where you're making a pointed discussion about something that I haven't seen.
Okay,
but I listened to his response to the criticism on him, and he presented something that was very nuanced, and he went at length into the horrors of World War II, which are unfathomable to me.
Absolutely. I can give you ones that are even worse from what the Soviets did. It's actually a big interest of mine. It's something I've studied a long time as someone whose ancestors fought on
Hey, fun fact. What side was the US on the side? Okay, so Soviets committed horrors during World War II? That's what Konstantin Kisin just said? Who was allies with the Soviets in World War II? Konstantin Kisin is talking about the horrors that the Soviets committed in World War II. Who was allies with the Soviets? That would be us. We were allies with the communists in World War II. We were on the side of the communists. We were on the side of the bad guy. Stalin. And Britain. Churchill was also allies with the Soviets. So does Konstantin Kisin think that it was stunning and brave for Churchill to ally with the Soviets, even if the Soviets committed atrocities?
The Eastern Front for the Soviet Union. Yeah. I mean, the Soviet Union committed unspeakable atrocities against the Germans in the latter stage. Millions of women raped to death. Millions, literally millions.
Yeah,
just horrific. And this is why World War II is so important, and this is what Tucker's right about. This is very analogous to the debate about Israel and Palestine, because you have to absolutely condemn atrocities that were committed by the Allies, such as they were. But it's also important not to confuse atrocities like the mass rapes of German and Eastern European women by Soviet troops with collateral damage, terrible collateral damage in the course of the war. So one of the big arguments about World War II is, should America have dropped a nuclear bomb on Japan?
Yeah.
Just change the
And
subject. He
if
just
you
changed the
talk to
subject
historians who
completely.
actually understand the issue and understand the moral calculus, they're unequivocal that this is something that saved hundreds of thousands of lives.
Yeah.
Because the Japanese were starving to death, and bringing the war to an end was the most important thing.
Dropping 2 nuclear bombs on Japan saved hundreds of thousands of lives. That might be believable if Roosevelt hadn't known that Japan was going to bomb Pearl Harbor and allowed them to do it, because Churchill was trying to drag the U.S. into World War II. And if Roosevelt just allowed Japan to bomb Pearl Harbor, he would then have a perfectly good reason to enter World War II. Maybe instead, Churchill should have minded his own fucking business and stayed away from America, and maybe we never should have gotten involved in the first place, and then maybe there would have been absolutely no reason to drop a nuclear bomb on Japan, and maybe they just should have stopped the attack on Pearl Harbor when they fucking knew it was going to happen in the first place, so they wouldn't have been put into a position of needing to enter the war. I know I'm not a historian, I'm just a psychologist. I just dabble in this stuff. But like, I don't know how an intellectually honest person can say, given the full context, that really, guys, we saved all sorts of lives by dropping nukes on Japan. So it's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Well, no, it's not actually reasonable when you zoom out and you look at the larger context.
And when the emperor of Japan attempted to surrender after the first bomb was dropped, there was a coup against him to prevent him from surrendering, right? So the point I'm making is, terrible things happen in war because that's what happens in war. So when Daryl Cooper talks about terrible things that the Allies did in terms of the firebombing of Dresden and all these other things, he's correct to say that there was a terrible human toll, but the question is, were those deaths avoidable? And the answer is yes, they were. And the person who could have avoided them was a man called Adolf Hitler, who could have either not started the war.
The argument that Konstantin Kisin is making is basically the same argument that Israel is making every time it bombs a school or a hospital or a refugee camp or a church in Palestine. We're not responsible for killing 40,000 people in Palestine. It's Hamas's fault. Hamas is making us do it, guys. Don't you know that all those women and children in Gaza are just human shields? We don't want to drop bombs on them. We don't want to blow up the third oldest Christian church in the world. We don't want to bomb refugee camps. We don't want to drop bombs when people are just trying to get food. We don't want to do any of those things. Do you know who's making us drop all these bombs on Gaza? It's Hamas, guys. It's their fault. They could prevent it. They could stop it at any minute. Hamas is literally making us kill children. In fact, Hamas made us shoot our own civilians on October 7th and then blame it on them. When Israel made the choice to shoot their own fucking people on October 7th rather than allow them to be taken hostage, which is fully documented on antiwar.com. It's called the Hannibal Directive. That wasn't our fault that we shot our own people, guys. That was Hamas's fault. That is literally exactly the same argument that Konstantin Kisin just made in regard to World War II. Churchill didn't have any reason. Like, Churchill had to firebomb Dresden, guys. Churchill had to firebomb Dresden. Do you know why? Hitler made him do it. Hitler made Churchill firebomb Dresden. Do these people even hear themselves?
Or he could have surrendered in order to prevent his country from being flattened to the ground when he was clearly in possession of all the facts and he knew Germany was not going to win, right? So
wow,
this is exactly the same thing about Hamas, right? In the modern context. Whatever you think about that issue, who's right, who started it, whatever, there's no getting into it. But once you get to the point of October 7th, when these people invade Israel, slaughter civilians and take hostages, Hamas can end this tomorrow. They can hand over the hostages and surrender the people who took them, and the war would be over. But they haven't done that. So
it's not Israel's fault they keep bombing Gaza, guys. It's not Israel's fault. It's Hamas's fault. Hamas could end this at any time. He literally just fucking said it. You're making us censor you. We don't want to censor you. You're making us censor you because you're not saying what we want you to say. If only you stay within the box that we're giving you, then we won't have to censor you. Don't you understand?
Who are the civilian casualties the responsibility of? They're the responsibility of the people who refuse to end the war by surrendering. In this case, Hamas. In Hitler's case, Hitler. So you have to be able to separate things like criminal behavior, like the mass rape of German women and other atrocities committed by the Allies, from the terrible things that happened to Germans as a result of the things that the Nazis did.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
When the Russians raped all those German women, it was because of Hitler, guys. Hitler made the Russians rape all those women. It was Hitler's fault, guys.
Am I making sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. It just it's odd. The other level of this is that, again, I'm so far removed from these issues, and I know a lot of people are too, and we're just like commenting on these things like they're sporting events, you know, like I understand Israelis cries of victory when they hit it good, but you also see just the leveling of a city. You're like, this is terrible stuff that we shouldn't be cheering on, and I don't know why it possesses our consciousness so much. And, you know, where there's tons of other atrocities happening, for some reason, Israel-Palestine just is lodged in the Western imagination. It's lodged in our...
Well, the way the Israelis describe it is no Jews, no news. I don't know how true that is, but...
What do they mean by that?
No Jews, no news. Well, you know, Assad can kill 500,000 Muslims in Syria. Yeah. No one gives a shit, right? So, look... Because my grandfather was Jewish, people will always accuse me of being on the side of Israel.
I can't imagine why.
Or at least racists do. But I look at it.
Bro, you literally just said that women and children in Gaza deserve to be killed because Hamas made Israel do it. If you wonder why people say you're on the side of Israel, Konstantin, it's because you're obviously and clearly on the side of Israel. And I think we can all ascertain why that is. You literally just said that 40,000 people, half of whom are women and children, deserve to be bombed because Hamas made Israel do it.
We had a woman called Melanie Phillips on trigonometry way before this flare-up, probably in 2019. And I said to her, look, I don't know anything about Israel. I don't understand anything about this. When I read the history of it as a complete amateur, the existence of the state of Israel seems quite questionable to me, frankly, the way it was created, you know, to some extent. And we put all these questions to her and kind of interrogated her on it. So I'm always someone who's been, frankly, a little bit skeptical about the Israeli argument, well, like, this is our land and blah, blah, blah. But when I look at the way this conflict is being discussed now, it is very clear to me that there is a gigantic difference between how that is covered and how that is analyzed and the calculus of morality in that conflict.
Yes, James Lindsay is extremely and unequivocally pro-Israel.
to every other conflict that exists anywhere else today or in the past. It's quite obvious to me.
Why do you think that?
Why do I think that is?
Yeah. Why did you make me beat you? I love you so much. Why did you make me do it? Exactly.
Just to clarify, are you asking me what evidence I'm basing that on, or what I think motivates that difference?
What do you think motivates the Israeli it's like a linchpin in our consciousness, in our storytelling, in you could go the Jews control the media, but I think that the Christians actually exist within that mythology too, and it's just we put so much weight on that.
Look, I think I'm sure that the kind of historical and religious dimensions part of it, but Israel is the outpost of Western civilization in the Middle East. And they are basically like a small Western nation in that region. And so our support for them is contingent on that.
Israel is not in the West. I'm so sick of like these Zionists painting Israel as though it's like Israel is like just not in the West. This is, again, Konstantin, there is truth and there is untruth. The truth is that Israel is not in the West based on a map. Israel is in the Middle East. That is literally true. You expressing an opinion that they are the West does not change a geographic map of them being in the Middle East.
And they're surrounded by enemies who hate them for both religions and geopolitical reasons. And so that's why, for example, all the people who are anti-West in America and Britain are on the side of Palestine.
Oh my God!
Because the West is on the side of Israel.
No,
it's kind of, that's how it works. And so the far left and the far right are both anti-Israel.
Wow. If you don't support Israel, then you do not support Western values. All the people who are on the side of Palestine, they don't support Western values. That is just stupid. That's stupid, Konstantin. That's stupid. If you support Western values, then you have to support Israel. If you don't support Israel, you are an enemy of Western values. Look at Benjamin Boyce's face. Again, beautiful freeze frame. Konstantin Kisin's turning on that PR branded fucking media training that he's gotten to be such a grifter shill. Benjamin Boyce is like, I don't know about that, Konstantin. I don't know about that. Because remember, Benjamin Boyce is not a conservative. Benjamin Boyce, I think is, I mean, I don't know exactly where he stands politically these days, but I think Benjamin Boyce probably has a lot of friends who are not crazy, but who are, well, a little bit more liberal, who are like, we don't support Israel and we don't like this war shit. So Benjamin Boyce, I'm betting you, I'm just making this up, I don't know for sure, but I'm betting you that Benjamin Boyce is not buying into this whole Western values argument. Let's see.
Israel for that reason. And then I just think the other thing has happened, and this is interesting as well, is the West has become, and this comes back to our discussion of the barbarian right, the West has become incredibly uncomfortable with the exercise of force and power. And this is why quite a lot of people on the sensible right really love Israel, and that's because Israel is the one country that's doing...
I know this will never happen, but I really wonder if Benjamin Boyce in his heart of hearts knows that Konstantin Kisin is full of shit. Like, after this conversation.
doing the things that people in our countries would like to do on the right, which is blow the balls off terrorists. Right?
Yeah.
But if you have people who are plotting another 9/11,
and now Konstantin Kisin is defending Israel putting little explosive devices in electronics. As though that's never going to be used against us. It's just against the terrorists, guys. It's only the terrorists. The terrorists made us do it. This is psychotic.
wouldn't you want their pager to explode? Right?
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people on the right would say. So one of the reasons that people are so angry with Israel is Israel...
Look at Benjamin Boyce's face. Watch Benjamin Boyce's eyes when Konstantin Kisin is like, wouldn't you want to put explosives in the pants of terrorists, Benjamin? Look at his eyes. Watch what happens. I'll try to pause it.
To explode? Right?
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people on the right would say. So one of...
His eyes literally popped out of his head. I'm gonna post that screenshot on Twitter later. Benjamin Boyce knows. He's always been a smart cookie. He knows Konstantin is full of shit. He knows. Benjamin Boyce knows this isn't the Konstantin Kisin of yore, Benjamin. This is the grifter shill Konstantin Kisin that is doing what he needs to do to make money, Benjamin. You know it, Benjamin. You may not want to admit it because you guys are friends and you guys have had good talks before, and maybe there was a time when Konstantin Kisin wasn't a grifter shill, but we all know you know, Benjamin. We know you know. We see you, Benjamin. It's okay. You know because you're one of the real people, Benjamin. Konstantin Kisin is no longer one of the real people. Maybe he was at one time, and then he got sucked into the political machine. And then he became a tool of the narrative. It's not the same thing as it used to be, Benjamin. It's just like with James Lindsay, same thing happened. James used to be real, got sucked into the political machine, made a fuck ton of money doing it, and now he's different, and this is why you're seeing the Gnostic sex cult, and this is why you're seeing the woke right. We know you know, Benjamin. It's okay.
One of the reasons that people are so angry with Israel is Israel doesn't give a shit about international condemnation. It's advancing its own national interest in the way that we're embarrassed to do.
Do you see us being able to get back to advancing our own national interests? I mean, in your video, you said, draw me a picture of a globalist, right?
Yeah.
And like the specter of an enemy behind things. I think two main points that I see, having spoken to you and rewatching those videos, that you're cautioning us against trying to pull every narrative apart just for the sake of, you lied to me once, I'm just going to see everything that you do as lies. So don't go too far, and also try not to see an enemy where there isn't one, or be really cautious with how you position yourself with regard to your political enemy, whether it's the globalists or systemic racism. You're cautioning against these specters, but the fact is that there is this. It's not a shadowy cabal, but like the system is pulling us apart. It's importing hundreds and thousands of migrants for some reason. We don't know who's atop of it. We have Kamala and Biden. We have Kamala. We don't have our country doesn't have a president right now. He's literally on a beach, but it's still running itself. So there is something, it's just kind of perpetuating itself. It's kind of,
it's the civil service, what we call the civil service, what you call the administrative state. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you correct
that? Well, that's
that?
also true in any other country. Like if Vladimir Putin goes on holiday, Russia doesn't go to a standstill, right?
Yeah. But it's obvious that Kamala and Biden have so little power. They have a nominal executive power. So one from the Machiavellian right, they are trying to analyze like how these managerial systems kind of perpetuate themselves and always extend and grow. So it's not like some shadowy cabal. It's just the way that the system is running us. And how do we wrest control back from this incredibly complex bureaucratic apparatus?
Well,
unless we kind of go to war with it. No, I'm trying to kind of square the circle. I didn't realize
you hadn't finished. Sorry, I
apologize. It's just it's like so Israel's small, it's homogenous in a certain way, and it's just going to do what it's going to do, and it doesn't care. Where's the political will in America to kind of reform our government and put it back to the Constitution or put it back to some other form?
Well, the government, this is where it becomes a matter of opinion, but I think you and I probably both agree that the government has become way too big and does way too many things and is responsible for way too many things. So one of the ways to do it is you have to fire a hell of a lot of the people who do all those things and cut a lot of the regulations that we've accumulated over time and a lot of the laws that have been passed and accumulated to govern how people relate to each other over time. And in order to do that, you have to elect people who are willing to do that.
Is your country going in that direction, do you think?
The guy who is running for leadership of the Conservative Party now says that we need to slash 100,000 civil service jobs. By the size, comparatively, Britain is quite a small country compared to the United States. Yeah. That's quite a lot of, that's a big axe he's intending to take. Now, whether he achieves any of that is a whole different thing. I would say that the UK is not heading in that direction. Every politician or former politician we've had on the show has told us horror stories about their complete inability to do anything, even when elected to the highest office in the land. So I completely agree with you on that. But I guess my view on that is we have to elect the person who's prepared to do something about that. I don't think that pursuing, an Eastern European style authoritarianism is going to solve that. And if it does, it's going to create quite a lot of other problems.
Yeah,
of a different nature, of a nature that I think would be incredibly.
It wasn't necessarily speaking out on Israel and Palestine. It was speaking in support of Nick Fuentes. That's really what did it. I mean, again, I've told this story before, but it was honestly shocking to me that me bantering with Nick Fuentes on Twitter right after October 7th, when I wasn't really even, at that point, I was very opposed to what Israel was doing. I was definitely speaking out about that, but the real pushback that I got was not that I was speaking out against what was going on in Gaza. It was, Carlin, how dare you speak up for Nick Fuentes? How dare you take the side of Nick Fuentes? And it was I have never seen anything like the wall of direct messages that were in my that were on my Twitter from people I hadn't heard from in literally years. How dare you talk about Nick Fuentes like that? How dare, are you a neo-Nazi now, Carlin? You're a neo-Nazi? I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And it was it was some of them I tried to reason with, and it was so aggressive. And I was like, what has the 25-year-old commentator done to you? Where has the 25-year-old commentator hurt you? You are a 60-year-old man. Are you really this afraid of a 25-year-old? It was, but you know what? The thing of it is again, I don't actually want to be Konstantin Kisin. I don't want to be in the political machine. I was in the political machine in 2020, and I never want to do that again. Ever, 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 ever. I quit. I gave them the middle finger, and I burnt it down, and I started over again. And I'm much happier now than I was then, because there's literally nothing they can do to control what I say. Oh, we're gonna blacklist you from our shows. So the fuck what? So what? You don't cover the stories that matter anyway. You literally don't cover the stories that matter anyway. You don't tell your audience the truth. You just show them lies and propaganda. When you're given primary source evidence, you ignore it. So you think I'm going to be fucking intimidated? Because, we're not going to have you on you can't sit with us. I don't fucking want to sit with you. I want to sit with the people who actually care about solving the problem. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure. Well, I really, again, this is why I like flying under the radar, because I'm like, I don't get put on lists, man. I don't get put on lists of things. Every once in a while, I get mobbed on Twitter, or people say, we don't want you on our show. And I go, okay, I didn't ask to be on your show, so that's fine. But I don't get put on lists, Mostly I can say and do whatever I want. And that suits me just fine. All right, we got about 12 more minutes of this interview. Let's see if Konstantin Kisin says anything more insane. And if you guys want to contribute to that super chat goal, we're only halfway to the super chat goal. I feel like you guys aren't really enjoying this content today, and maybe I shouldn't do content like this because, we met the super chat goal yesterday when we were watching Socialism. Why aren't we making more progress towards that goal? I'm just saying we're not going to do content like this anymore if you guys don't like it.
Antithetical to everything America is and wants to be.
Yeah. And in Britain too.
And in Britain too.
Yeah.
But in Britain, we would never Brits, Britain is a deeply ingrained anti-fascist country. It's just, we can't take anyone seriously who takes themselves seriously. So we're always going to buffoons like Boris Johnson.
You think another Churchill is in the cards? Another strong man kind of guy?
Well, you got to remember. So this is interesting with Churchill. I mean, I wouldn't say Churchill was a strong man in the sense in which people use the term strong man now. He was just, but he was strong, sure. You got to remember Churchill, while he was prominent in the British government in the time, he was actually seen as a kind of fringe warmongering figure in the run-up to World War II. So he kept making predictions and warning and saying things are going to get really bad, and everyone sort of dismissed him and said that he was a bit of a clown. It was only when things got really bad that the British people actually had him as leader. So if there is going to be another Churchill, things have to get really bad, and we're heading in that direction, sure.
Yeah. Konstantin, you got a heart out, as you said. Thank you so much for your time and for opening up dialogue.
I don't know if this was productive or not, because I feel like
you,
we maybe didn't get too much into the critique of what I'm saying that you wanted to make. So I have another 10 minutes if you want to have another go at it. I don't know.
Thank you, Brucey. Appreciate it.
So when I have a friend, James Lindsay, he's using this mutual friend. He's trying to use woke right to contain or to describe something that's really troublesome to him on the right. And I have been speaking with a lot of these, a lot of the thinkers in that group, and I see that there's always going to be low resolution actors and bad faith actors, there's stunning amounts of racism and anti-Semitism too, and yet there's also a lot of very interesting arguments and critiques of the liberal order and its origin and its reality, and a call for an accounting of the roots of our problems. And for me, it always goes down to, it can't be a religious revival or anything, but that which is good in us needs to reassert itself. And we need to return to that which is good in us. And for some people, it's the pursuit of truth through argument, through discourse. And others, it's a more spiritual awakening. But without that precursor to good government, without a good people, this isn't going to work. And it might be the case that the evil that I see, or the bad, or the decay, the degeneracy is turned up because it's novel and we look at it and it's not as big of a problem as we make it out to be. And that most people are good, and you sit in traffic and everybody's obeying the laws and just listening to their podcasts, and hoping for the good. But we also see with the way that children are being medicalized, and there's these huge problems and stuff like that. So when you go about questioning these assumptions, and it's really fascinating to go listen to Curtis Yarvin and kind of get like this totally wacky perspective on things. That he was ahead of the curve in 2007. He was describing this woke thing, and he was making the etiology of how this is a form of Protestantism that has finally scrubbed itself of God, and how Dawkins got pwned. It's really amazing. And then you get to the end where he's like trying to argue for monarchy. You're like, well, how does that work? CEO and stuff like that. You're like, okay, well, a contained monarchy would be great if Trump did follow through, hired Elon and did a complete.
That's never going to happen.
Like really, then that's a really powerful move to do, and that's why maybe that's why he's getting assassinated every other day now. I don't know. And then, but there's these systems of thought and discourse that are releasing a lot of really creative energy. And so I'm just wary when we try to section off this whole group of people and say that there's a tendency in them to act like this other group of people. They're woke, they're critiquing power, they're just asking questions. I feel that is undermining a lot of potential discourse. And so that was my reaction. It's like, are you trying to shut down discourse? And I'm not calling you censorious, but isn't that like by describing these people as woke, we can just say, okay, they're in that box. I don't have to listen to anything they say. But that cuts us off from this really, it's just aesthetically pleasing. So I don't really have it. Yes.
So we've had Curtis Yarvin on trigonometry. An interesting guy, interesting ideas. I wouldn't describe him as part of the woke right.
I appreciate it.
So you know how you said
Curtis Yarvin is Jewish.
These people are critiquing the system as it is.
Jewish.
And there's some validity to their arguments.
Yeah.
Jewish.
That's what woke people did. They critiqued the system as it was.
That's what we do. That's what you do as a centrist.
No,
you're critiquing the system as it is. And
no.
Seriously?
No. I'm not. Sorry, I didn't quite get to the end, right?
Okay.
So the woke people came along and they said, look at this system. It's got its flaws, and there's this, and there's inequality, and there's systemic this and structural that.
It's all about capitalism, Konstantin. Come on.
All of those things, by the way, are partly true, right? We know that. For example, yes, we had Roland Fryer on the show to talk about police brutality against African Americans. Yes, it's true that black people do not get killed by the police at a higher rate than white people.
Critique the system?
Right? But they do get roughed up more by the police. Now, is that evidence of systemic racism? Maybe, maybe not. We can have that discussion, right? But the point is, there is some truth to the fact that people from minority backgrounds don't quite get the same deal as white people. Now, where I differ from the woke argument is I don't think overturning every aspect of our society and defunding the police and all of that is the solution.
But
nonetheless, my point is, those people came along and they made massively overstated, ridiculous arguments about the way the system was flawed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we called them woke because of the ridiculous overstatement of their arguments, not because there wasn't an element of truth to their critique.
Okay.
Now, when I talk about the woke right, I'm not saying, I'm trying to think of a good example.
Does Konstantin Kisin really have no fucking idea what woke is? I can't keep saying the same thing over and over again. I can't.
Well, like you said, Curtis Yarvin. I don't think Curtis Yarvin is the woke right. When I talk about the woke right, I'm talking about people who frankly have lost the fucking plot, like Candace Owens.
There it is.
Right. Like Tucker Carlson, who's going over to Russia and interviewing. By the way, journalists are entitled to interview presidents of foreign countries, but Tucker tried to conduct a genuine interview and failed. He tried to jump in repeatedly and then just gave up, right? And then he does all these videos about shopping carts. So I'm not trying to prevent people from having conversations. I'm just pointing out that a small slice of the right has a brainworm, the exact same brainworm that the small fringe of the left had. And my view is that both the left and the right have to do the job of advocating for the things that they need to advocate for, while marginalize those people who are fucking lunatics
Konstantin
on their
Kisin
own
is
side.
definitely in
Now,
the land
who
of
is a
Ricardia.
lunatic and who is asking the right questions is always a matter of discussion and debate. And what I think is a lunatic and what you think is a lunatic is likely to differ.
Hang on.
And that's fine. But that doesn't mean that just because some people on the left have good ideas doesn't mean we have to accept woke left ideas. And just because a lot of people on the dissident right have interesting ideas about the way to critique the current system doesn't mean we have to accept the ideas that Churchill was funded by the Jews and that's why he wanted to start World War II.
Factual.
That's my point. I think that's a fair point.
No, and
That's
I guess
just
my
factual.
counter to that, which is patently obvious, I probably don't even need to say that, is that just because there are loons on the left doesn't mean that we should not study their thought and not lump the loons in and not use the accusation of woke to completely cut out access to, I mean, mentally access to,
I don't know.
this
I think at
rich
this point, that's exactly
discourse.
what we should be doing. Do
Konstantin
we
is
not?
saying we don't have to
I'm
accept
pretty
facts we
comfortable
don't
that
like.
Robin DiAngelo is a lunatic whose work requires no further study.
Well, yeah.
And I'm equally confident that Daryl Cooper, who says that Churchill was funded by the Jews to start World War II, is equally someone whose ideas do not require.
Are you serious? He just compared Daryl Cooper to Robin DiAngelo because Daryl Cooper has ideas that Konstantin Kisin doesn't like. If this asshole is not completely discredited after this, I just don't know what to say. I really just don't know what to say. I will, and listen, again, I like Benjamin Boyce. I really do. I think Benjamin Boyce knows what's up just based on his reaction throughout this entire interview. If Benjamin Boyce doesn't fundamentally write Konstantin Kisin off after this conversation, I'm going to be very, very, very confused by all of this. I really am. Because this is just ridiculous. This is just, on the face of it, fucking ridiculous. To any serious person that is being intellectually honest about this situation. This is so much gaslighting. It's so much gaslighting and deflecting and obfuscating and hypocrisy. It is everything all rolled into one, and it is goddamn infuriating. It really is.
Further study because he's clearly wrong, factually wrong. Right.
And the entire network that he's connected to, then I can just see that people use that as a guilt by association and then just completely disregard. So that's just the, that I'm just saying that just because some people, it sounds just ridiculous.
2 people, right? I criticize 3 people. I criticize 3 people. I criticize Daryl Cooper for being factually wrong. I criticize Tucker Carlson for endorsing him, not for hosting him even, but for endorsing him. And I can criticize Candace Owens because her brain's broken. That's it, right? So then we look at any other, I mean, it's hard to describe her as a thinker, but you look at any other thinker on that side of the right, and you look at their ideas and you go, is this like the woke left? No, or it is. And that's how we do it, right? So we take each
based on Konstantin Kisin's definition of what the woke left is, which is fundamentally unhinged from reality. Konstantin Kisin is saying, I am the one with the expertise to define the woke left. Well, he ignores all primary source evidence about who the left is, who the leftist activists are, what they believe, what they're saying, how they define their words, etc., etc., etc. And then he's saying, guys, if something seems similar to my made-up definition about the woke left, then it must be the woke right. And because he made up his own definition about the woke left that is fundamentally unhinged from reality, that means he can change his definition of the woke left at any point. He can add stuff in, he can take stuff out that's not convenient, and then he can smear anyone that he intellectually disagrees with as being on the woke right without actually tackling their arguments. Isn't that convenient for Konstantin Kisin?
Person at a time and analyze what they're saying. Curtis Yarvin, I don't consider part of the woke right. Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, I do. I don't even know if Daryl Cooper's the woke right. Maybe he's just he's a World War II revisionist without having a political view of it.
Yeah.
You
yeah.
just called him
He
a
did say, by the
neo-Nazi
way, in
like
that
half
interview
an
right
hour
at the end
ago.
that after World War II, being right-wing was made illegal in all of Europe. So it sort of tells you what he thinks genuine right-wingness means. But
Yeah,
anyway.
changing definitions of things
What
sounds
do you think
familiar.
he means? I mean, I understand that there's an argument about denazification, and all this anti-racist stuff is just kind of an extension of that's why it's white men and white self-interest, quote
not
unquote,
white
that's
men
being
or white
vilified because
self-interest,
it's
it's
all kind of
capitalism.
lumped into being fascist.
Oh my god.
So there's our
Well, if we
view
look at
of-
the facts
yeah,
of Europe, in Europe, there are some countries in which it's illegal to be a Nazi.
yeah,
So that's it. It's not illegal to be right-wing. There are many right-wing parties. For example, in Germany, there's the AfD, which is a genuinely right-wing, probably some people would argue a far-right party, who's some of whose adherents, not all, of course, but some of who, chant Ausländer raus, foreigners out, Germany for the Germans, which is very reminiscent of some other things that we've heard in German history. Nonetheless, that party is not illegal. There is a
Why is
significantly
Israel allowed to
right-wing
have a
party in
nationalist
France,
country and
Marine
no
Le
one
Pen's
else
party.
is?
There is a right-wing movement in Holland and many other countries. So if we're talking about the facts, which I think we ought to be, what is illegal in Europe is to be a Nazi. Now, you and I can have a debate about whether that's a restriction of people's freedom of thought and speech, right?
Yeah.
But if we take the claim he made, what he's saying is to be right-wing is to be a fascist.
yeah.
On the facts.
No,
that's
it's
what
to
he's
be
saying on the
anything
facts of
that's
it.
not a socialist is fascism.
Perhaps, that's his view of
Oh
what
my God.
it means to be right-wing. I don't know.
I wish I could interview him to hear him
No, I'm sure you can.
speak to that. I mean, yeah, it shit posting muddies the waters, but it's totally open to interpret that at face value, which is pretty direct to say that's what.
Well,
he's
I'm just looking at the facts, right? If you
Yeah.
say being right-wing is made illegal in Europe, then you have to
Yeah.
look at what is illegal in Europe. What is
Being a
illegal in
Nazi.
Europe is to be a Nazi.
Yeah.
Therefore, you must think that being right-wing is to be
a Nazi.
a Nazi. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Just using logic. Anyway, man, listen, it's been great chatting with you. And look, the one thing I'm glad about is actually that people like us can have a conversation and we don't disappear down the Twitter rabbit hole of you said this about me and therefore I'm going to attack you.
Yeah.
And it's all love and respect from me. I'm glad we had this conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much, Konstantin. Anything else you want to plug coming up?
No, nothing to plug. I just wanted to apologize if I have been verbose excessively and steamrolled you, as you said.
I'm here to listen. I'm very similar to you. I'm here to learn. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have you back on the show soon.
Absolutely. Have a good day.
Take care, my friend.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good night.
Wow.
Project 20.
Wow. Wow. All right, guys, we have a very important job to do right now. Bot has made this map of the land of Retardia. And Bot, I know I've asked you to make a couple edits to this map, but I might ask you to make one more, because on the map of the land of Retardia, we have the woods of Retardia, we have the Gnostic sex cult, we have King James Lindsay I. I would like to make some sort of addition to the land of Retardia for Konstantin Kisin. I don't know exactly what that is, but maybe can we just brainstorm for a minute about where Konstantin Kisin belongs on this map of the land of Retardia? Maybe Konstantin Kisin can be the jester, the court jester at the court of James Lindsay. Jester Konstantin, Jester Kisin, something like that. Home of Kisin the Oh, that's it! That's it! Bot, he's in the mountain. He's in this cave right here. He is in the cave in the mountain. He's in some sort of he's in the fucking mountain. Home of Constantine the Deluded. Or maybe there is an additional mountain created over here or something. Or a cave. Home of Kisin the Deluded. Yeah. Yeah. Bot, I think you should accept that this map might be an ever-evolving thing. This is now your official project. So we're going to do Kisin, home of Kisin the Deluded. In time, we will call him Column. And if we can make it look like a cave, I think that would be best. All right, bots on it. This is deeply important. We have to get this map perfect before we put it on a t-shirt and sell it in the store. I have nothing else to say about that interview. That interview was crazy. And honestly, like I hate to say I told you so, but I have been saying this about Konstantin Kisin ever since he unfollowed me for showing him primary source evidence. Because it's like, listen, it's not that he unfollowed me. It's not that he blocked me, although that was like annoying and like weird. It was why he did it. It was why he did it that's the problem. Because, like, here's the thing. If someone people unfollow me all the time, that's fine. I don't really actually care. People block me all the time, I don't actually care. But if the only thing that I've done to you is to say, here's primary source evidence, and I never interact with you other than that, and I never cause problems before that, and maybe you've heard some gossip or something, but you're supposed to be an ethically honest person and an intellectually honest person, and like if I haven't done something directly to you, then what's the problem? And the only thing I've done is say, here's primary source evidence, and you block me for that. That tells me about your character. That tells me who you are. That tells me what you care about. And I said from the very beginning, I was like, that's not real. Yeah, it was just, it was gross for me to watch him, honestly. It was gross. It was a gross interview. Benjamin Boyce, again, has the patience of a saint. But even his facial expressions gave him away, and I kind of love him for that. I really do. All right, guys, that is all we have for today. As a reminder, please do make sure you are a member of my Substack, or at least a subscriber on my Substack. I've got a lot of good stuff going up later tonight, including hopefully clips from that live socialist call we went to yesterday. If you missed that, that is available on demand on the Substack now. And so you can support the work I'm doing for $8 a month, $80 a year. You guys are who funds my work. I don't have any big financial backers that are breathing down my neck to try to get me to sell a political narrative. I will never do anything but tell you guys the truth and show you the receipts to back it up. And then you can decide based on the evidence that I give you whether or not I'm full of shit. And you can decide what you think about it. That is my one and only job. So you can support me on the Substack for $8 a month, $80 a year. If you want to access the first draft of the Socialist Dictionary, that is available now on a different Substack. And this is a specialty item. And this is $10 a month or $100 for the year. And what this is when you subscribe to speaksocialist.substack.com, you are actually funding me writing my next book, a couple of books actually. The Socialist Dictionary is going to be a standalone book that is going to exist as a paperback, that's going to exist as a digital download. And if you are a member of this Substack, you will get a free digital copy of that book when it's done. You can find the first draft on the Substack right now. There are literally dozens of socialist words that are broken down, and I define them in plain English. And if you want to check it out and see, you can actually get a free trial on this Substack. Oh, actually, I don't know if you can on that one. I don't know if you can on that one. Don't know if you can. Maybe you can on other posts. Sorry, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you just have to pay me money to access it for the weeks of work that I put into writing that stuff. That's sometimes just the ropes, guys. Hey, Renan, thank you. Thank you for suffering through that. Yeah. Well, we all suffered through it together, didn't we, Renan? We all suffered together. But the good news is this. Tomorrow is Friday. And Friday is happy hour. And happy hour means beer. And so I will see you guys back tomorrow with beer or cider, maybe. I was really enjoying the cider last week, honestly. So maybe we'll do another cider round. But I will have alcohol of some sort at 5 p.m. tomorrow, and I will see you guys back then. Please make sure you've mounted the like button on the way out the door. Please make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you are not already. I am on YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and X. And so follow me on all the things. And that's it. That's all I got. I'm going to go cry now into my pillow because of how black-pilled I am with the world and how I'm surrounded by liars and con artists. And there are so few real people in the world. And it's just, yes, you can have wine. Yep, you can have liquor. You can have drugs. I'm not endorsing that. I'm just saying it's your body, man. Do you want? Do you want? We're all losing anyway. The socialists are going to win. May as well have fun while we still can. I'll leave you on that note. Take care, guys. Have a great rest of your night. We'll see you soon. Bye.